Damn it! The bug was still there. A ghost in the machine, a single line of corrupted logic that was holding my entire project hostage. 11 p.m. The glow of the dual monitors was the only light in my small apartment, painting the walls in shifting shades of blue and white. My world had shrunk to this desk, this chair, this problem I couldn't solve. I leaned back, the cheap office chair groaning under my weight. I rubbed my eyes. They felt like they had sand in them. Gotta get a new curved monitor, I mumbled to the empty room. My eyes are shot. I scrolled through the endless lines of code, my brain feeling like a fried egg. I gave up for a moment, tabbing over to my social media feed for a quick hit of dopamine, a distraction from the failure. And there it was, the first post, a gleaming, wide-angle ad for the latest 49-inch curved gaming monitor. Immerse yourself, the tagline said. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Fucking capitalists, I said, a little louder this time. Listening to everything. I shook my head, a familiar mix of disgust and resignation settling in. It wasn't even surprising anymore. It was just the way things were. I closed the tab, pushing the thought from my mind, and dove back into the code. The ad was creepy, but the bug was the real monster tonight. 30 minutes bled into the next. I was in the zone, tracing variables, checking dependencies. The city outside was a distant hum. My apartment was my fortress. Then I heard it, a sound so quiet it was almost nothing. A soft PSS shet of white noise from the smart speaker on the bookshelf across the room. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, then vanished. My fingers paused over the keyboard. I glanced at the speaker, a small gray cylinder. Probably the Wi-Fi. The connection in this building was garbage, always dropping for a second or two. Annoying, but not weird. I dismissed it and kept typing. A few minutes later, my throat felt dry. I pushed my chair back and stood up, the joints in my back cracking in protest. I walked the 10 feet to my small kitchen, the linoleum cold under my bare feet. I grabbed a glass, filled it with tap water, and drank it down in one go. The silence of the apartment felt heavy now. No traffic sounds, no neighbors, just the low hum of the refrigerator. I walked back to my desk, and I stopped. My hands were empty. The glass was back on the counter. But I stopped. Something was wrong. The cursor. The blinking vertical line on my screen. It wasn't where I had left it. I'd been working in the middle of a function, line 347. Now the cursor was blinking patiently at the very end of the file, on a blank new line, 812. My first thought was mechanical. I must have hit the end key when I stood up, or maybe I'd placed my hand on the mouse and accidentally scrolled down. It had to be that. I reached for the mouse to scroll back up, to find my place again. My fingers touched the plastic. I moved my hand. The cursor on the screen did not move. It just kept blinking at the bottom of the page, steady, rhythmic. I pushed the mouse harder, sliding it across the mouse pad. Nothing. I lifted it. The red optical light on the bottom was on, a solid red eye staring at my desk. It was working. It had power. But I had no control. What the hell? The words were a whisper. Then it moved. Not with the frantic sweep of my own hand, but with a slow, deliberate smoothness. An invisible hand was guiding it. It glided up the page, not jumping but scrolling with an unnatural precision. It stopped at line 347, exactly where I had been working. It hovered for a second. Then it clicked. It dragged. It highlighted the entire block of code I'd spent the last 90 minutes writing. A perfect, neat blue block of my own frustration and effort. And then, with another silent click, it pressed delete. It was all gone. Fuck! The word exploded out of me, raw and furious. What the fuck is this? A virus. A remote hack. Some asshole script kiddie from a forum. My mind raced, trying to find a logical box to put this in. I grabbed the mouse, wrestling with it, but the cursor stayed frozen for a second before beginning to drift lazily toward the top of the screen like a balloon let go. PSSHSHSHSHSHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHThe sound from the smart speaker was back. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a roar. A blast of static that filled the room, harsh and grating. It wasn't fading, it was holding steady, a wall of noise. At the exact same moment, the TV in the living room area turned on. The screen, dark and dead a second ago, flashed to life. Not to a channel, not to a home screen, just snow. A chaotic, churning storm of black and white pixels, accompanied by a high-pitched shriek that layered on top of the speaker's static. The light strobed across the room, casting dancing, frantic shadows on the walls. My heart was a drum against my ribs. This wasn't a hacker. This was something else. I stumbled back from my desk, my chair rolling into the wall with a loud thud. The noise was unbearable, a physical assault. I lunged for the wall socket behind the entertainment stand and ripped the TV's power cord out. The screen died instantly, the shrieking noise cut short. But the static from the smart speaker didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to get louder, filling the void left by the TV. I scrambled over to the bookshelf, my hands shaking, and fumbled with the speaker's power cable, yanking it free from the device. The static cut out. Silence. A thick, heavy silence that pressed in on me from all sides. My own breathing was ragged and loud, my heart hammered in my ears. I stood there, panting in the near darkness of my apartment, lit only by the faint glow of my computer monitors. I scanned the room, my eyes darting to the windows, to the locked front door. Nothing. No one. I had to get the whole system offline. Now. I rushed back to my desk, my feet clumsy. I didn't bother with a proper shutdown. I reached down to the tower on the floor, found the power button, and held it down. I kept it pressed, a white-knuckled prayer, until the hum of the internal fan spooled down into nothing, and the blue light on the case winked out. The monitors went black. The apartment was plunged into complete darkness. The only light was a thin sliver coming from under the front door. The only sound was the thumping in my chest. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Listening for what? I didn't know. A floorboard creaking? A doorknob turning? Anything. Nothing. Just silence. A silence that was 100 times more terrifying than the noise had been. And then I heard it. Click, clack. A soft, plastic sound. It came from my desk. Click. My blood ran cold. I stared into the darkness where my computer was. I could see the faint outline of the monitors, the keyboard. Clack. Click, clack, clack. Click. The sound of typing. Slow, rhythmic, unhurried. Each press of a key was distinct, isolated in the dead air of my apartment. It was coming from my keyboard, the one I was just staring at. The one connected to a computer that had no power. The small LED for the number lock was dark. The keyboard was a dead piece of plastic. But the keys were moving. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could hear them. Something was typing. I backed away. My heel hit the wall. I didn't dare make a sound. I couldn't scream. My throat was squeezed tight. My mind was screaming, though. It's in here. It's in the room. It's at my desk. My phone. I needed my phone. Call someone. Anyone. The police. My hand shook as I jammed it into my jeans pocket, fumbling for the familiar rectangle. My fingers closed around it. I pulled it out. The screen was already on. My stomach dropped. I hadn't touched the power button. It wasn't on the lock screen. It wasn't on my home screen with all the apps. It was open to the Notes app. The screen was white, the text black. A single line of text sat at the top of a new note. The cursor was blinking at the end of it, a patient, silent pulse in the dark. It was a message that had just been typed. A curved monitor won't help. I didn't sleep. I sat in my desk chair in the dark, the dead monitors like black mirrors. The phone lay face up on the desk, the white screen a single unholy light in the room. A curved monitor won't help. The words just stayed there. I hadn't touched the phone. I hadn't closed the app. I just stared at the message, the blinking cursor, its silent, mocking heartbeat. My own heart had finally slowed from a sprint to a heavy, punishing marathon against my ribs. It was a hack. It had to be. A sophisticated, terrifying hack. Some bored genius asshole in another country was having a laugh. He'd found a zero-day exploit in my smart device's firmware, strung them together, and executed the perfect digital haunting. It was the only explanation that let me breathe. The only one that kept the walls from closing in. I repeated it in my head. A hacker. A virus. A person. When the first weak, gray light of morning pushed through the blinds, it felt like an act of mercy. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. I stood, my body a single, stiff ache. I needed coffee, I needed noise, I needed the world to feel normal again. I forced myself through a routine, stumbled to the kitchen, turned on the faucet. The sound of running water was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I wouldn't use the coffee maker. It was smart. It was connected. I boiled water in a pot on the stove like a caveman. The apartment was a mess of disconnected technology. The TV power cord lay coiled on the floor like a dead snake. The smart speaker was still on the bookshelf, unplugged. My computer tower was silent. I decided to get it all out, clearing the air, a physical act to purge the digital violation. I grabbed the kitchen trash bag, a big black sack, and started stuffing it. The speaker went in first, then the tangled nest of cords behind the TV. I yanked the Ethernet cable from the wall with a satisfying rip. All of it went in the bag. Evidence of a crime, or maybe just a bunch of expensive junk I could no longer trust. The bag was heavy. I hefted it over my shoulder, unlocked the front door, 3 locks, 1 deadbolt, and stepped out into the hallway. The air in the hall was cool and stale. It smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and faint old cooking smells from other apartments. It was quiet. It was always quiet on the 7th floor. I walked toward the trash chute at the far end of the corridor, and that's when I saw it. The thing that made me stop. Apartment 7B, directly across from mine. In the 3 years I'd lived here, that door had always been closed. I didn't know the neighbor, never saw them. I figured it was some old woman who never went out, or maybe it was just empty. But now, it was open. Not wide open, just a crack. A dark vertical slit maybe 2 inches wide. It was nothing. Somebody was moving in, or moving out. They'd propped it open and forgotten. I told myself that. My brain supplied a dozen logical reasons, but my feet had stopped moving. My hand, holding the trash bag, felt slick with sweat. I looked at the dark slice of space. My place had been invaded by ghosts in the machine. A real, physical space being wrong felt different. It felt worse. I took a step closer. Then another. I was just going to walk past, go to the chute, dump the trash, go back inside, and drink my primitive boiled coffee. But I didn't. I drifted toward it, pulled by a stupid, primal curiosity. I dumped the trash bag on the floor next to me. I leaned in, my head tilted, trying to see through the gap without getting too close. It was pitch black inside. Not just dim. It was a solid, matte blackness that seemed to swallow the light from the hallway. I couldn't make out any shapes. No furniture, no boxes, nothing. It smelled wrong. Not like food or people. It smelled like dry dust and old paper, like a place that hadn't been opened in a very long time. I was being an idiot. I leaned back, ready to grab my trash and go. Click. The sound was tiny, sharp and mechanical, not a sound from my apartment. It came from the darkness in front of me, from inside 7B. It wasn't a light switch. It wasn't a settling floorboard. It was the distinct, unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. Old school. Not a phone. A real, physical camera. My blood went cold. I flinched back, my heart jumping into my throat. I stared at the door, at the black sliver. And as I watched, the door moved. It swung shut. Not with a slam. It didn't make a sound. It just glided closed with a smooth, silent finality, the latch clicking softly into place. It was now just a door again, a closed door. There was no sound of footsteps inside. No one yelled, "Sorry!" No one peeked out. It was as if a ghost had closed it. What the hell? I whispered to the empty hallway. I scrambled back, grabbed my trash bag, and practically ran to the chute. I jammed the bag in, my hands shaking. I didn't wait to hear it land. I spun around and hurried back to my door, fumbling with the keys. I got inside and slammed it shut, ramming the deadbolt home. I leaned against the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was being watched. From across the hall, someone was in there, in the dark, with a camera. I couldn't work. I couldn't even think about the code. I paced the 10 feet from my desk to the kitchen and back. My coffee sat on the counter, getting cold. The silence in my apartment was gone. It had been replaced by the memory of that click. Every creak of the building, every distant siren made me jump. My eyes kept darting to my front door, to the peephole. Who was in 7B? Why were they taking pictures of me? Was it connected to last night? My mind was a storm of questions with no anchor. Ding-dong. The doorbell. The sound ripped through the room, loud and violent. I froze, mid-pace, my entire body rigid. I hadn't had a visitor in months. No one just shows up. I crept to the door, my heart hammering. I put my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. The fisheye lens distorted the patterned carpet, making it curve away into nothing. The door to 7B was flat and brown and closed. There was no one there. It was a prank. Kids from another floor. Dropping a flaming bag of crap was more their style, but maybe they were evolving. I waited. 10 seconds. 30. A full minute. Nothing moved. My anger started to bubble up, pushing past the fear. I was being messed with. First the hack, now this. I undid the chain and the top lock. I turned the deadbolt slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. I was going to whip the door open, catch them hiding around the corner. I took a deep breath, gripped the knob, and yanked the door inward. Empty. Of course it was empty. The hallway was exactly as I'd seen it through the peephole. Silent. Still. I scanned left, then right. No one. I felt a surge of frustration. Fucking kids, I muttered, starting to close the door. Then I saw it. It wasn't there when I looked through the peephole. I would have seen it. Lying on my worn, gray doormat. A small, white square. A Polaroid picture. It was lying face down. I stared at it. Time seemed to slow down. My hand trembled as I bent down and picked it up. It felt stiff, new. I turned it over. The image was still milky, a murky gray-green. The chemicals still working. I watched, mesmerized, as the picture bloomed into existence. A figure started to resolve from the fog. A man, standing in a hallway, leaning forward. His face was a mask of suspicion and curiosity. He was holding a black trash bag. My trash bag. He was standing in front of my door. It was me. It was a picture of me from just a few minutes ago, when I was standing in front of apartment 7B, peering into the darkness. The angle was low, intimate. The perspective was undeniable. It had been taken from inside that dark apartment. The air left my lungs. The picture felt like it was burning my fingers. This wasn't a prank. This was a statement. I was here. I saw you. I captured you. Something inside me snapped. The fear and confusion of the last 12 hours erupted into pure hot rage. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let some freak play games with me. I threw my door open, not caring about the noise. I still had the Polaroid clutched in my fist. I stormed across the hall, the 4 steps feeling like a mile-long warpath. I didn't knock. I hammered on the door of 7B with the bottom of my fist. "Hey!" The sound echoed in the stairwell. "Who's in there? Open the fucking door!" Silence. No answer. Just the flat, dead wood beneath my knuckles. "I know you're in there, you son of a bitch! I got your picture!" I waved the Polaroid at the door as if it could see. "Let's talk! Open the door!" I pounded again, harder this time, the impacts jarring my shoulder. I was shouting, my voice raw. "Come on! Face me!" On my third desperate slam, the door swung inward. It didn't burst open from the force. It just unlatched and drifted open silently, as if it had been waiting. I lost my balance. Stumbling forward, catching myself on the doorframe, I lurched into the apartment, ready for anything. A fight. A confrontation. A weapon. I found nothing. The apartment was completely, utterly empty. There was no furniture, no boxes, no camera. The floor was bare concrete, stained and cracked. The walls were yellowed plaster, peeling in long strips. A thick, undisturbed layer of dust covered every single surface, so thick I could see my own footprints from the 2 steps I had taken inside. A single, grimy window looked out onto a brick wall, letting in a pale, sickly light. The air was thick, with the smell of abandonment and decay. No one lived here. No one had lived here for a very long time. Months, maybe years. My rage evaporated, replaced by a profound, chilling bewilderment. My mind reeled. The picture, the click, the door closing. How? It wasn't possible. I stood there, a fool in an empty, derelict room, the Polaroid still in my hand. It was proof of an event that could not have happened. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the impossible emptiness. I needed to get out. My heel hit the doorframe. I turned to leave, to get back to the relative safety of my own locked apartment. My foot scuffed against something on the floor, just inside the doorway. It made a small, metallic scraping sound against the concrete, cutting through the silence. I looked down. Lying in the thick dust was a small object. I bent over, my body moving on autopilot, and picked it up. It was a set of keys. 3 keys on a simple metal ring. A Yale key for a deadbolt. 2 smaller keys for the doorknob locks. They felt heavy, familiar in my palm. My stomach twisted. I jammed my other hand into my jeans pocket and pulled out my own key ring. I held them side by side. They were identical. A perfect match. The same brands. The same cuts on the teeth. One set was a mirror image of the other. They were keys to my apartment. But there was one difference. My keychain, a goofy plastic cat I'd gotten at a street fair, was gone from the set I'd just found. In its place, hanging from the ring, was a small, tarnished charm. A tiny, detailed skull, cast in dull, heavy metal, with empty sockets that seemed to stare right through me. My breath came in ragged, useless bursts. I stood in the middle of my living room. My world shrunk to the 2 objects in my hands. In my left, my own keys, the familiar weight, the cheap plastic cat charm digging into my palm. In my right, the impossible copy. The stranger, the intruder, with its tarnished metal skull. They were a perfect match, a perfect violation. My mind refused to process it. An empty apartment, a camera click from the darkness, a Polaroid of a moment that had just happened, developed with impossible speed. And now, this. Keys. A copy of my keys. I stumbled backwards, my heel catching the edge of the rug. The copy, the skull set, clattered onto the hardwood floor. The sound was too loud in the dead quiet of the apartment. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't touch it again. My eyes were locked on it, this small, heavy piece of metal that had just torn a hole through my reality. This wasn't a hacker. This wasn't a prank. My hand, the one still clutching my own keys, trembled so violently the keys chimed against each other. The sound made me flinch. I needed to talk to someone. A real person, not a text, not an email. A voice. I fumbled my phone from my pocket, my thumb smudging the screen as I tried to unlock it. My contacts list swam before my eyes. I jabbed at the first name I could focus on. Lena. It rang once, twice. My heart hammered against my ribs with each ring. Come on, Lena, pick up, pick up. Hello? Her voice was a dose of pure, undiluted sanity. Lena. My own voice was a cracked whisper. I cleared my throat. Lena, something's happening. Whoa, you sound awful. Are you okay? Did you finish the deployment? No. Fuck the deployment. Listen to me. I paced, my bare feet cold on the floor. I walked from the window to the kitchen counter and back, a caged animal. The apartment across the hall. 7B. What about it? The one you said was haunted by the ghost of quiet old ladies? It's not funny, Lena. The door was open. I looked inside. It was dark. And I heard a sound. A camera. Then someone dropped a picture at my door. A Polaroid of me. Standing right there. There was a pause on her end. A Polaroid? What the hell, man? Who takes Polaroids anymore? That's not the point, I nearly shouted. I went over there. I banged on the door, and it opened. Lena, it was empty. It's been empty for years. Dust everywhere. No one was there. Okay, slow down. Just hang on. I could hear the sound of her shifting, the rustle of fabric. She was taking it seriously now. So a prankster took your picture and then ran off before you got to the door. Some asshole kid in the building. No, you don't get it. There were keys, Lena, inside the doorway of that empty apartment. A set of keys. My voice dropped. There were keys to my apartment. A perfect copy. Silence. This time it was a heavy, concerned silence. What? How is that even possible? Did you lose a set? No! I never lose my keys. They're identical. Except for the charm. Mine has a cat, this one has a little metal skull. Jesus Christ, she breathed. Okay, that's not a prank. That's stalker-level shit. You need to call the cops. Right now. And the building manager. Change the locks. I'm serious. Her voice, her panic mirroring my own, strangely helped. It made it real. I wasn't just going crazy. I know, I said, my breath finally evening out a little. Yeah, I will. I mean it. Don't wait. Do it now. Do you want me to come over? No, I'm okay, I lied. I just needed to tell someone. To make sure I wasn't losing my mind. You're not losing your mind. Some fucking psycho is messing with you. Be careful. Lock your door. It's already locked, I said, my eyes darting to the deadbolt. Okay. Call me back after you talk to the manager. I mean it. I will. Thanks, Lena. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the sofa. I felt a sliver of relief, the simple human connection, a weak shield against the impossible. I looked down at the floor. The keys with the skull charm were still there. I nudged them with my toe, then bent down and picked them up. I walked over to the small coffee table and set them down deliberately in the center, next to a stack of old magazines. A piece of evidence. A problem to be solved. I wouldn't let it out of my sight. I felt a sudden, desperate urge to get out of the apartment. Just for a few minutes. To breathe air that wasn't trapped in here with me. To feel the concrete of the sidewalk under my shoes and see other people. I'd go to the corner store, buy a soda, anything. A small act of normalcy. I grabbed my wallet from the kitchen counter. I'd take the skull keys. I couldn't leave them here. It felt like leaving the enemy in command of my fortress. I turned back to the coffee table. They were gone. My blood ran cold. No, I whispered. I had just put them there. I saw myself do it. I saw them sitting on the dark wood of the table. I ran my hand over the surface. Nothing. I dropped to my knees, checking underneath. Nothing but dust bunnies. I pulled the cushions off the sofa, throwing them onto the floor. I patted them down, frantically. Nothing. My heart started to pound again. A frantic, wild drumbeat. My brief moment of calm shattered into a million pieces. Okay, think. I stood up, running my hands through my hair. You picked them up. You walked around. You put them in your pocket. It was a lie, but a plausible one. A lie to keep the screaming back. I jammed my hands into the pockets of my jeans. Empty. I checked the back pockets. Empty. My annoyance was turning sharp, metallic with fear. I strode to the kitchen, yanking open drawers. Cutlery rattled. Nothing. I checked the top of the fridge. I looked in the trash can. My brain was supplying frantic, illogical possibilities. Maybe they fell in? Dick? Suck. Nothing. They were gone. They had vanished from a locked apartment. Fucking hell, I spat, slamming a cabinet door shut. I was losing it. I had to be. Maybe Lena was wrong. Maybe I was just cracking up. I abandoned the idea of going out. I was a prisoner again. Fine. I needed to call the building manager. I'd use the spare key to let him in when he came to change the locks. The spare. Where did I put the spare key? My desk. I kept it in the top drawer of my desk, in a little box with old USB drives and paper clips. I walked over to the desk, the dead monitors staring back at me like black tombstones. I pulled the handle of the top drawer. It slid open with a smooth, quiet sound. And there they were, the skull keys. They were lying right in the center of the drawer, on top of a pile of old receipts. Placed, not dropped. Placed, neatly. The little metal skull seemed to grin at me from the darkness of the drawer. But that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. They were sitting on a small, square piece of paper, a torn corner from a notepad. With trembling fingers, I reached past the keys and picked up the note. The handwriting was a rushed, jagged scrawl, dug into the paper with too much pressure. 5 words. Don't lose them again. I dropped the note, as if it were on fire. I stumbled back from the desk, my legs hitting my chair, sending it rolling into the wall with a hollow thud. He was here. He was in my apartment. While I was on the phone with Lena, he had walked past me, taken the keys from the table, opened my desk drawer, and left a fucking note. The air in the room was suddenly thick, unbreathable. Every shadow became a hiding place. The closet, the space under the bed, the bathroom. He was here, right now, watching me. My phone buzzed on the sofa. The sound was like a gunshot. I jumped, a choked cry escaping my lips. I stared at the phone as it vibrated against the cushion, the screen lighting up. Lena. A lifeline. She was calling back, checking on me. I scrambled for the phone, my hands clumsy. I almost dropped it. I swiped to answer, pressing it to my ear. Lena! My voice was a choked, desperate rasp. Lena, he's in the apartment. He was in my house. There was a half-second of silence, not the static of an open line. A dead, digital quiet. Then a voice spoke. It was not Lena's voice. It was a low, electronic whisper. A synthesized sound, like a text-to-speech program trying to imitate a human and failing horribly. It was flat, cold, and it came from inches away from my ear. I never left. I screamed and threw the phone. It hit the opposite wall with a sickening crack of plastic and glass, then fell to the floor, silenced. At the same instant, the lights in the room clicked off, plunged into darkness. The only light was the weak, gray city glow coming through the blinds. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I was a statue, my ears straining, waiting for the sound of footsteps, a hand on my shoulder, a blade. Flicker. The overhead light flashed on for a split second, then off again. On, off, on, off. A frantic, terrifying strobe, turning the room into a series of jagged, frozen images. My desk, the sofa, the broken phone on the floor. In the strobing light, my eyes were drawn to the large, blank wall of the living room. The wall that faced the sofa. The wall that had always been empty, painted a boring, sterile white. It wasn't empty anymore. Flicker. A dark line. Flicker. Another. And another. They were scratches. Deep, dark gauges carved into the plaster. My mind struggled to make sense of the shapes appearing and disappearing in the flashing light. They weren't random. They were letters. They were words. My body was frozen in place, but my mind was screaming. In the harsh, blinking rhythm of the light, I watched the truth etch itself onto the wall of my home. The same 3 words, over and over, clawed into the plaster, filling the entire space. A frantic, overlapping manifesto of possession. Flicker. My house. Flicker. My house. Flicker. My house. 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 My legs wouldn't move. The world was a series of violent, strobing snapshots. My empty living room. The overturned chair. The shattered phone on the floor. The wall. The words clawed into the plaster. My house. My house. My house. Each flash of the light burned the image deeper into my retinas. The air was gone. I was trying to breathe, but my lungs were useless sacks of meat. He was here. He was in the dark spaces between the flashes, watching me, playing with the lights, playing with me. A sound cut through the strobing chaos. The final, definitive click of the deadbolt on my front door locking itself. Not the sound of it being turned by a key or a knob. An internal, mechanical thunk, a final seal on my tomb. That was it. The spell shattered. My body chose flight. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I lunged. I scrambled over the back of the sofa, my socked feet slipping on the cushions. My hips slammed into the armrest, a dull, hot spike of pain. But I didn't care. I landed on the floor in a clumsy heap, crab walked backward, my eyes still fixed on the strobing. a part of my brain screaming that if I looked away, the darkness would take me. My backpack, my wallet, my keys. The thought was a single, clean shard of glass in the mess of my mind. I grabbed the backpack from beside the door, slinging it over one shoulder. My keys, my real keys, the ones with the cat charm, were on the small entryway table. I snatched them. Wallet? On the kitchen counter. No time. I didn't have time. I wrenched the deadbolt. It was stiff, fighting me. I put my whole body into it, my shoulders screaming in protest. It gave with a loud crack. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I just ran. The hallway was dim, buzzing with the low hum of the building's ancient electricity. My bare feet slapped against the worn carpet. I hit the button for the elevator, a stupid, useless instinct, then cursed and threw myself at the heavy door to the stairwell. It boomed open, and I plunged down the concrete steps, taking them 2, 3 at a time. The sound of my own ragged breathing and the pounding of my feet echoed in the enclosed space. Every echo sounded like a second set of footsteps behind me. I burst out into the lobby, a blur of faux marble and dying plants. The night doorman, a sleepy old man named Sal, looked up from his crossword puzzle, his eyes wide. "Hey kid, what's the—" I didn't answer. I pushed through the glass doors and hit the cold night air of the city. It was a physical shock, damp and smelling of exhaust fumes and rain. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran, putting distance between me and that apartment, that room, those words on the wall. I ran until the stitch in my side was a hot knife and my lungs were on fire. I finally slowed, gasping, leaning against the cold brick of a building. My head was light. My body trembled not from cold but from adrenaline. I looked around. I was 6, maybe 7 blocks from home. Under the orange glow of a streetlight, I saw a sign across the street. The Daily Grind. Coffee, 24/7. Light. People. Safety. I crossed the street, the automatic doors hissing open to welcome me. The warmth inside was instant. The smell of burnt coffee and sugar hung in the air. A few people were scattered at tables, heads buried in laptops or books. A girl with pink hair and a nose ring stood behind the counter, wiping it down with a rag. It was the most normal thing I had ever seen. I needed to call Lena. I needed to tell her. I dug in my pockets for my phone before the memory hit me. The crack of plastic and glass against the wall. It was gone. Useless. I walked to the counter. The barista looked up. "What can I get for you?" "Hi. This is a weird question," I said, my voice still shaky. "My phone, it's broken. Can I please use your phone? Just for one call. It's an emergency." She eyed me for a second. My wild eyes, my lack of shoes, my frantic energy. But she must have seen something other than crazy in my face. Pity, maybe? She sighed and pulled a cheap Android from her apron. "One call. Make it quick. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you." I punched in Lena's number, my thumb trembling so badly I had to do it twice. It rang. Once. Twice. The sound of the ring was a countdown. "Hello?" Her voice. Real. Sane. "Lena, it's me." "Nate, what the hell? Are you okay? I called you back and it went straight to some weird screeching sound. Then nothing. So that was it." The sound of the phone breaking. "He was in the apartment, Lena." The words came out in a rush. "He was there while I was on the phone with you. He left a note. He messed with the lights. He wrote on the goddamn wall." "Wrote? What are you talking about? Slow down. Where are you?" Her voice was sharp now, all business. The concern was a physical thing I could feel through the phone. "I ran. I just got out. I'm at a coffee shop. I'm okay." "Jesus Christ." "Okay. Stay there. Tell me where you are. I'm coming to get you." "The Daily Grind. It's on, I looked out the window, trying to get my bearings. "It's on Mercer and 4th. "Okay. Mercer and 4th. I know where that is. I'm getting in my car now. Don't go anywhere. You hear me? Just stay there." "I'm not moving," I promised. The relief was so strong, it almost buckled my knees. Help was coming. Real, actual help. "Okay. I'll be there in 15 minutes. 20, tops." "Thank you, Lena." "Don't thank me. Just stay safe." She hung up. I stood there for a second, holding the phone, the world slowly coming back into focus. I handed it back to the pink-haired barista. "Thanks," I said again. "Everything cool?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Yeah, getting there." I bought a bottle of water I didn't want and slid into a booth in the corner, my back to the wall. I put my backpack on the seat next to me. I could see the whole shop from here. The doors. The counter. No surprises. For the first time in an hour, I felt like I could take a full breath. 15 minutes. All I had to do was wait for 15 minutes. My thoughts started to race. The keys. The Polaroid. The phone call. The writing on the wall. It was a person. A very smart, very sick person. Someone who could duplicate keys, hack smart devices, move without a sound. A stalker. But why? I wasn't important. I was a coder who fixed bugs for a faceless financial company. My life was a flat line of boring routine. It made no sense. A noise pulled me from my thoughts. A low, electronic whirring. It was coming from my backpack. I froze. It was the sound of a cooling fan. The sound of a laptop spinning up from sleep mode. My laptop. I hadn't touched it. It should have been off. Slowly, as if it might bite me, I reached over and unzipped the main compartment. The screen was on, casting a pale blue glow inside the black nylon. I pulled it out and set it on the table. My heart began to pound again, a slow, heavy drum beat against my ribs. The desktop was empty, just my boring default background. But there was one window open. A chat program. It was a simple, no-frills interface, like an old IRC client. A single line of text had already appeared in the log. The sender's name was listed in the top left corner. LNH. I stared at the name. Then I read the message. My blood went cold. Less than LN, greater than, you shouldn't have told her where I am. My breath hitched. No, this wasn't possible. How? How could he know? How could he be in my laptop? How could he know her name? He was listening. He had listened to the call. He had to have. The barista's phone. He hacked her phone in the seconds I was using it. My hands flew to the touchpad, clumsy and slick with sweat. I tried to type a reply. Who is this? But another message appeared before I could finish. Less than LNH, greater than it was a mistake to involve her. I snapped the laptop shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet cafe. A couple of people looked over. I shoved the machine back in my bag, my mind screaming. The circle of safety had just shrunk to the size of this booth. He wasn't just in my apartment. He wasn't just on my phone. He was everywhere. He was a ghost in the machine, and he was coming for me. And now I had led him to Lena. I had put her in danger. I had given her name, and now he knew she was coming here. Hey, excuse me? I looked up, startled. It was the barista. She was holding out her phone again, a confused look on her face. Your friend, she said. She's calling back. I stared at the phone. The screen was dark. I couldn't see the caller ID. My mind was a civil war. One part of me screamed, Don't answer it. It's him. It's a trick. Another, more desperate part, whispered, It's her. You have to warn her. Tell her not to come. I took the phone. My hand was shaking uncontrollably. I pressed it to my ear, not saying anything. For a second, there was only static. Then her voice came through, but it was completely different. It was thin, ragged, and terrified. A whisper. Nate, don't trust the messages. It was Lena. It was her voice, her real voice, laced with a panic that mirrored my own. Lena, what's going on? Where are you? I'm in my car. I was about to leave, she stammered, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Nate, I just looked out my window, my apartment window. There's someone standing across the street. Under the light. A cold dread, absolute and final, washed over me. Who, Lena? Who is it? There was a pause, a choked sob. Nate, it's you. It looks exactly like you. He's looking right up at my apartment. He's smiling. Jingle. The sound came from the front of the cafe. the bell on the door. My head snapped up. Through the front glass, a figure was stepping inside, shaking the rain from her coat. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me, a bright, relieved smile spread across her face. She waved. It was Lena. She was here. I stood up, my legs weak. My eyes darted from the smiling woman walking toward me, to the backpack on the seat beside me that held the impossible message, to the phone still pressed against my ear, where the terrified voice of what was also supposed to be Lena was still whispering. "Nate, are you there? He's starting to cross the street. Oh, God, he's coming toward my building." The Lena in the cafe was only a few feet away now. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. She was wearing the brown coat she always wore, her dark hair damp from the rain. She looked real. She looked perfect. "Nate?" she asked, her voice full of warmth and worry, exactly as it should be. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." My throat closed. Two realities were screaming at me for attention, and my brain was the battlefield. In front of me, solid and real, was Lena. Damp hair, worried eyes, her familiar brown coat. The Lena who hugged me on bad days and brought me soup when I was sick. In my ear, a ghost, a whisper of terror that was also Lena. The Lena who was watching my double walk toward her building, a predatory smile on his face. The world seemed to tilt. The two images wouldn't merge. They were two separate, warring truths. "Nate?" the Lena in front of me said. Her voice was right here, in the air, not a digital echo in my ear. She took a step closer, her hand reaching for my arm. Her expression was one of genuine, deep concern. "What is it? Talk to me. You're scaring me." I flinched away from her touch. A gut reaction. I didn't know which reality to trust. Don't come here," the voice on the phone whispered, choked with panic. "He's at the door, Nate. He's buzzing my apartment." My eyes were locked on the Lena in the cafe. She was beautiful and solid, and her presence should have been a comfort. Instead, it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. If she was here, who was on the phone? If the voice on the phone was the real her, what was this thing standing in front of me? Jingle. The bell on the cafe door rang again. A man in a rain-slicked poncho came in, shaking his head and muttering about the weather. A normal person. A piece of the real world. My head snapped back to the woman in front of me. She hadn't moved. Her hand was still outstretched. "Nate, please," she begged, her voice now trembling. The line in my ear went dead. Just a low hiss. Then silence. The connection was cut. I was alone with my choice. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild animal in a cage. I looked at her face. The worry in her eyes, the slight quiver of her lower lip. It was her. It had to be her. The phone call, the messages, the doppelganger. It was a trick. A sophisticated, cruel trick to isolate me. To make me push away the one person who could help. He was trying to make me run from her. That single thought cut through the chaos. I lunged forward and grabbed her arm. Not gently. My grip was desperate, bruising. Her gasp was real. Her wince of pain was real. "We have to go." "Now," I said, my voice a raw command. "Go where?" "Nate, what's happening?" "Not here. I'll explain. We have to go." I didn't wait for an answer. I dragged her toward the door, my backpack slung over my other shoulder. We burst back out into the wet, cold night. The city lights were a smear of neon and yellow. "My car's this way," she said, pulling me to the right. Her keys were already in her hand, the remote chirping as she unlocked the doors of a small, beat-up hatchback parked halfway down the block. We threw ourselves inside. She fumbled the key into the ignition and the engine sputtered to life. I locked my door, then I reached across and locked hers. My head swiveled, scanning the street, the alleyways, the dark doorways. I half expected to see a figure standing under a streetlight, smiling. There was no one. "Drive," I said. "Nate, you have to tell me what's going on." She put the car in gear but kept her foot on the brake, looking at me. "That phone call, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. Just drive, Lena. Get us away from here, please." She saw the look in my eyes. The raw, hunted fear. She didn't argue. She pulled out into the sparse traffic, the windshield wipers thumping a frantic rhythm against the glass. My apartment was out of the question. Going back there was suicide. Your place, I said, the words coming out before I'd fully thought them through. Can we go to your place? She glanced at me, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Of course. But you're not getting out of explaining this. The drive was silent. I just watched the city roll by, my reflection a pale mask in the window. My mind was a racetrack of impossibilities. The duplicated key, the hacked smart lights, the messages on my laptop, the phone call. It was a person, a stalker, but one with impossible skills. And now he had faked her voice, faked her presence somewhere else, to manipulate me. The paranoia was a physical thing, a film of sweat on my skin. I had led him to her. I had brought this into her life. Lena's apartment was on the third floor of a smaller, cleaner building across town. It was the anti-apartment to mine. Brightly lit hallways, a faint smell of lemon cleaner, no buzzing fluorescent lights. It was a sanctuary. The moment she double-locked the door behind us, a fraction of the tension in my shoulders eased. She took my backpack and set it on the floor. Okay, talk. I told her everything. From the start. The keys that weren't mine. The Polaroid of me sleeping, the escalating texts. I told her about the strobing lights, the words clawed into my wall, the phone call with her while he was in the room. I told her about the laptop in the cafe, the message from Lai N.H. And finally, I told her about the last phone call. The two Lenas. She listened, her face growing paler with every word. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, the only sound in the room was the hum of her refrigerator. Jesus, Nate, she finally whispered. She came over and sat next to me on her sofa, pulling a blanket around my shoulders. I was shaking and hadn't even realized it. You need to go to the police. And say what? I shot back, the frustration boiling over. That a ghost in my computer is sending me scary messages? That he can somehow make a phone call as you from your location while you're standing in front of me? They'll think I'm insane. They'll send a psych team, not a SWAT team. She knew I was right. The thought hung in the air between us. Okay, she said, her voice taking on a practical edge. She was always the practical one. Okay, let's think. This person, he knows your apartment. He's obsessed with it. My house, he wrote. Maybe it's a former tenant. Maybe there's something about the building, something online. It was a flimsy thread of hope, but I grabbed it. Doing something felt better than just sitting here, waiting for the next attack. Your laptop? She nodded, grabbing it from her coffee table. We sat side by side on the sofa, the screen casting a cool glow on our faces. The world felt a little smaller, a little safer, just us against the problem. We started with the address, just ads for other units for rent, Zillow listings, nothing. We added words like crime, complaints, a few noise complaints from 2 years ago. A busted water pipe in 2018. We were hitting a wall. This is useless, I muttered, slumping back. Wait, Lena said. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Let's try older news archives, local papers, and let's be specific. She typed, my building's address death accident. The search results were different this time. Buried on the second page was a link to a digitized archive of a local neighborhood paper, the Downtown Ledger. The headline was small, unassuming. Tragic accident in Westmoreland building. Our building. The date was from 5 years ago. Click it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Lena clicked. An old, grainy news article appeared on the screen. It was short, just a few paragraphs. My eyes scanned the text. A young man was found dead in his apartment early Tuesday morning in what officials are calling a tragic accident. The victim, identified as Nathan L., a freelance computer programmer. My breath hitched. Nathan. Nate. A programmer. Lena read it at the same time. She looked at me, her eyes wide. Nate, it's a coincidence, right? It has to be. I didn't answer. I kept reading, my heart pounding a slow, heavy beat. The article detailed how he was found by a building manager, after neighbors reported a strange smell. The cause of death was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty, unvented gas heater. An accident. But then there was the last paragraph, the last detail. While the death has been ruled accidental, police noted a strange detail. Neighbors reported that in the weeks leading up to his death, the victim had become erratic and paranoid, often shouting and breaking things in his apartment. One neighbor, who wished to remain anonymous, stated, "He was always talking about someone watching him, that they were in his computers, in his phone. We all just thought he was under a lot of stress." The victim was found in apartment 7B, my apartment. He wasn't just a programmer named Nathan. He was a programmer named Nathan who lived and died in my apartment. A programmer named Nathan who thought he was being watched through his electronics. Who people thought was crazy. Just before he died, the room was silent. The theory that this was all just a sick stalker, a random person, evaporated. This was something else. Something older. Thunk. The sound was soft, but final. The lights in Lena's apartment, the kitchen light, the floor lamp, the small light over her desk, all went out at once. The laptop screen went black, its cooling fan spinning down into silence. We were plunged into near total darkness, pierced only by the faint orange glow of the streetlights outside her window. "Lena?" I said, my voice tight. "Power outage, maybe," she whispered back, but her voice lacked conviction. Then came the sound, a low hiss, static. It was coming from the corner of the room, from her television set. A big, dark screen that was off. It shouldn't have been making any sound at all. The hiss grew louder, sharper. The sound of a dead channel. The sound of my broken phone. It filled the small room, crawling under my skin. We were both frozen, staring at the blank screen. Then, a voice cut through the static. It wasn't human. It was synthesized, robotic, each word clipped and devoid of emotion. It came directly from the TV's speakers. It was not an accident. A sudden, blinding flash. The power snapped back on. The lamp, the kitchen light, everything illuminated the room in a harsh, sterile glare. The static from the TV cut out. The room was silent again. Normal, as if nothing had happened. Lena let out a small, choked gasp. I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the laptop on her lap. The screen had flickered back to life. The news article was still there. But it had changed. A single line of text in the article had been highlighted in a bright, angry yellow. And the text itself was different. The original words, "the victim," identified as Nathan L., a freelance computer programmer, were gone. In their place, one word had been inserted. It pulsed in a sickening, digital red, blinking on and off in the silent apartment. You. Sleep was not an option. We stayed on Lena's couch until the first gray light of dawn bled through the blinds, turning the dark room into a landscape of muted shapes. The laptop was closed. The word "you" had vanished when the power came back, but it was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. Every time I blinked, I saw it. Pulsing. Red. Lena had dozed off, her head resting on my shoulder, a blanket clutched in her fist. I hadn't slept. I just stared at the wall, listening to the city wake up. The distant rumble of a garbage truck. The first few birds. Normal sounds. It all felt like a lie. This couldn't go on. Hiding. Waiting for the next text, the next power outage, the next impossible message to appear on a screen. He said my apartment was his house. He was tied to it. The ghost of Nathan L., the paranoid programmer who died there 5 years ago. It wasn't random, it was a haunting. A very, very specific haunting. I needed to go back. The thought was insane. I knew it was insane. But another thought fought back, stronger and more desperate. I was losing my grip. The line between what was real and what he was manufacturing was blurring. Was the call with two Lenas real? Was the message on the laptop real? I needed one solid thing to hold on to. I had to see my apartment in the daylight. I had to face the scratched walls and the alien key and prove to myself that I wasn't just breaking down. "Lena," I whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. They were bloodshot. "Nate, what time is it?" "It's morning," I said. My voice was rough. "I have to go back." Her face went pale. She sat up straight, pulling the blanket tighter around her. "No, no way. We're going to the police today. We're showing them the article. We are not going back there." And say what? The frustration from last night was still there, a bitter taste in my mouth. That the ghost of a dead programmer is hacking our electronics? They'll laugh us out of the station. They'll put me in a 72-hour hold. You know I'm right. So we wait? We just wait for him to what? Follow us here? She shot back, her voice rising with an edge of panic. No, I'm going back alone. I need to get my wallet, my phone charger, a change of clothes. I need to see it. In the light. I need to know it's real. I looked at her, and my voice dropped. Or, I think I'm going to go crazy, Lena, for real. She saw the desperation in my eyes. The argument died on her lips. She just stared at me for a long moment, the hum of her refrigerator filling the space between us. Fine, she said, her voice tight with disapproval. Fine, but I'm going with you. I'm not letting you go in there by yourself. I'll wait in the hallway. That's the deal. It was a stupid deal that put her in danger, but I was in no position to argue. I was too tired and too scared to go alone, even if I wouldn't admit it. I nodded. The drive across town was a silent, tense affair. The morning traffic was picking up. People were on their way to work, listening to the radio, drinking coffee. Their worlds were normal. Ours had been cracked open, and something old and angry had crawled out. We parked a block away. Walking toward the Westmoreland building, my building, felt like walking to my own execution. It looked so bland in the daylight. Just another brick box full of people living their lives. But I knew what was waiting in apartment 7B. In the drab, flickering light of the lobby, I fumbled for my keys. I took Lena's keys from her. I slid her apartment key off her ring and handed it back to her. What's this for? She asked. Just in case, I said. Stay right by the elevator. You hear anything, you don't come in. You run. And you call 911. You understand? She nodded, her expression grim. Be careful, Nate. I walked down the long, familiar hallway. The worn carpet. The faint smell of stale cigarettes. My hand was shaking as I put the key in the lock. It was my key, the one I'd always had. It turned smoothly. I took a deep breath, like a diver about to go under. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. I clicked the door shut behind me, the sound echoing in the silence. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. A mess. A backpack on the floor. A coffee mug on the small table. It was my space, but it wasn't. My eyes immediately went to the wall by the kitchenette. The words were still there, gouged into the plaster. My house. A wave of cold relief washed over me. It was real. I wasn't insane. The evidence was right there. I wasn't imagining it. This was happening. I needed to ground myself. I tossed my keys on the counter and walked past my unmade bed, past my desk with its dark, silent laptop, and into the bathroom. My reflection was a stranger, pale, with dark circles under my eyes like bruises. My hair was a wreck. I looked haunted. Jesus, I muttered to the man in the mirror. I look like hell. I leaned over the sink and twisted the cold tap. The water came out in a weak stream. I cupped my hands, letting them fill. The water was icy against my skin. I splashed it on my face once, twice. The shock of the cold was a welcome distraction. It was real, tangible. It cut through the fog in my head. I kept my face in my hands for a second, water dripping through my fingers, just breathing. Finally, I straightened up. I raised my head to look in the mirror again. My heart stopped. The man in the mirror didn't move. I was standing straight. My head was up. But the reflection of me was still bent over the sink, head down, water dripping from its unseen face onto the porcelain. My blood ran cold. The air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. This is not possible. My mind screamed the words, but no sound came out. I stood frozen, staring. My brain was a battlefield, the physical sensation of my own body at war with the image my eyes were seeing. I am standing up. It is not. Why is it not? A high-pitched ringing started in my ears, slowly. So slowly. The figure in the mirror began to move. Not like a person straightening up. It uncoiled. Like a snake. Its head lifted, slow and jerky, a puppet on a string. Water ran down its face, a face that was mine but was horribly wrong. It was my face, but the weariness was gone, replaced by a terrible, focused intensity, and then its eyes met mine. They were not my eyes, they were holes. Two perfect, deep, black holes that drank the light in the room. There was no white, no iris, just endless, empty black. And then its lips, my lips, began to peel back from its teeth. The smile stretched and stretched, wider and wider, far past what was humanly possible, a hideous, predatory grin of pure malice. It was a smile that said, "I see you. I have you." I tried to scream, but my throat was closed. I took a step back, my legs like jelly. The thing in the mirror raised its right hand. My hand. It brought it up to the glass. It pressed its palm flat against the surface, right where my face was. I could feel the cold of it through the glass, a phantom touch on my skin. I could see the minute details of the palm print, my palm print, smearing against the inside of the mirror. That broke the spell. A scream tore out of my throat, raw and animal. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the bath mat. I went down hard, my head cracking against the tile floor. I didn't feel the pain. I just scrambled backward on my hands and feet, a crab-like scuttle of pure terror, my eyes locked on the grinning thing, wearing my face behind the glass. The apartment door burst open. "Nate!" Lena! She rushed in, her face a mask of fear. She saw me on the floor, gasping, pointing a trembling finger at the open bathroom door. "In the mirror!" I choked out, the words barely forming. "It's in the mirror!" She hesitated for a beat, her eyes wide. Then she moved cautiously toward the bathroom. I could see her from my spot on the floor. She peered around the doorframe, her body tensed, ready to bolt. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Her face shifted from terror to confusion. "Nate," she said, her voice soft but firm, trying to pull me back from the edge. "There's nothing there. It's just you." She looked back at me, her eyes full of pity and worry. "It's just your reflection." I pushed myself up, my body screaming in protest. I crawled to the doorway and looked. She was right. The reflection was normal. It was me. A pale, terrified version of me staring back from the mirror. My hair wet and matted, my eyes wide with a terror that looked like madness. The black pits were gone. The impossible smile was gone. It was just an ordinary mirror in an ordinary bathroom. Did I imagine it? The thought was a fresh stab of horror. Was I finally, truly breaking? Did the stress and the fear finally conjure a hallucination? No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, it was there. It was right there. Lena knelt beside me. "Nate, listen to me. We need to get you out of here. We need to get help." My eyes stayed locked on the mirror, searching for any sign of the monster. Nothing. Just my own pathetic face. And then I saw it. I saw the reason the thing in the mirror had felt so real. I stood up, my legs still unsteady, and took a step closer to the sink. Lena stood up with me, her hand on my arm. "Nate?" I didn't answer. I just pointed. On the surface of the mirror, right where the thing's hand had been, right over the reflection of my own face, was a mark. It was a handprint. A perfect, wet handprint, the 5 fingers and palm clearly defined. The water from it was still fresh, just beginning to form tiny rivulets that slid slowly, impossibly, down the surface of the glass. It was printed on the mirror from the inside. We didn't talk. We ran. Out of the bathroom, past the wall with its carved message, past my open laptop. I didn't grab a single thing. Not my wallet, not my keys. My hand slammed the door shut behind us, and we didn't stop running until we hit the elevator button, jabbing it, over and over like it would make the car come faster. The hallway was silent. The building felt dead. Inside the metal box, descending, Lena finally spoke, her voice a ragged whisper. "Nate, the handprint." "I know," I said. My own voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. It was on the inside. "I know, Lena." The doors opened to the lobby. We burst out into the cool morning air and didn't stop until we were locked inside her car, the engine roaring to life. She drove. I just sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, watching the normal world slide by, people walking dogs, sipping coffee. Their lives hadn't been broken open. They didn't know that reality was a thin sheet of glass and that something could press its hand against it from the other side. Where do you go when your apartment is trying to kill you? When your own reflection is a monster waiting for you to look away? The police were still a dead end. Shelters were for a different kind of trouble. We drove for almost an hour, aimlessly, the city streets a blur. "We need to know more," Lena said finally, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We can't fight something we don't understand. The article you found, Nathan L. the programmer. We need everything we can get on him." The thought of digging deeper sent a spike of fear through me. It felt like poking a nest of hornets. But what was the alternative? Wait for it to find us again? Where? I asked. "The main library." "Downtown," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of resolve. "They'll have archives, old newspapers, public records. We need to know who he was before he became that." So that's where we went. The Central Library was a huge, old building of stone and marble, a temple of knowledge that felt a million miles away from the horror of apartment 7B. It was quiet. It smelled of old paper and floor wax. For a moment, a stupid, dangerous moment, I felt safe. We found the archives in the basement, a quiet room filled with humming microfiche readers and heavy, leather-bound books of old newspapers. A librarian with tired eyes pointed us toward the correct years and left us alone. The work was slow, mind-numbing. We sat side by side, scrolling through grainy black-and-white images of news from 5 years ago. Headlines about city council budgets and local sports teams flashed by. It was so normal. So boring. Hour after hour, the only sounds were the whir of the machine and the soft rustle of pages. My eyes burned. My hope dwindled with every page turn. We were chasing a ghost with a library card. It was insane. "I've got the primary obituary," Lena murmured, her voice flat. She was looking at a different reader. "Nathan Lasker, age 27. Died in his residence. Cause of death listed as, quote, inconclusive, pending toxicology, but the paper never followed up. Police suspected an overdose. He was a freelance data security analyst. Kept to himself, no family in the state. It was nothing we didn't already know. A dead end." I leaned back in my chair, the plastic groaning in the silence. My head throbbed. I felt the pull of sleep, a heavy, leaden exhaustion that went deeper than muscle. Maybe I had imagined the handprint. Maybe Lena had been so freaked out she'd imagined it too. Maybe we were both losing our minds together. "Wait," Lena breathed. I opened my eyes. She wasn't looking at the main article anymore. She had scrolled to a different section of the page. The letters to the editor. A tiny column of text, crammed between an ad for a mattress sale and a complaint about garbage collection. "What is it?" I asked, leaning over. She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. The letter was from a person identifying themselves only as a concerned neighbor. It was a long, rambling complaint about noise coming from Mr. Lasker's apartment at all hours. Cursing, banging, things being thrown. The usual stuff you'd ignore. But it was the last sentence. The very last line of the letter. I read it aloud, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a shame." The poor young man was always polite in the hallway, but I'd hear him through the walls, always talking to himself, ranting about the man in the wall who was trying to wear his skin. The man in the wall. The fluorescent lights of the basement hummed. The smell of old paper was suddenly suffocating. I saw the words gouged into my plaster. My house. I felt the phantom cold of the handprint on the mirror, a hand that had reached through from somewhere else. He wasn't just a ghost. He was something that believed he had been invaded, and he had spent his last days fighting it. The new Nam. Now it was my turn. This was it. This was the proof. The link. The sign that we were on the right track. A wave of adrenaline, cold and sharp, washed away my exhaustion. Beep. The sound was loud. Digital. A single unified note that cut through the basement's quiet hum. It didn't come from one place. It came from everywhere. I looked up. Lena looked up at the same time. The half-dozen computer terminals scattered around the archive room, the ones people used for digital catalog searches, had all changed. A moment ago they displayed search bars and library logos. Now every single screen was a stark electric blue. and on every screen, in a simple white block font, was a single two-word message. Found you. My blood turned to ice. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It wasn't in the apartment anymore. It had followed us. Here. Into this public, safe space. The librarian, who had been reshelving books near the stairs, let out a small gasp. What in the world? A system crash? She started walking toward the nearest terminal, her brow furrowed in confusion. No, I whispered, grabbing Lena's arm. We have to go. Now. But it was too late. The trap was sprung. Flicker. The lights overhead blinked once, twice, then died. We were plunged into a half-darkness, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the sickening blue glow of the 6 computer screens. The librarian yelped. Then came the new sound, a low, grinding rumble. It started soft, then grew louder. It was coming from the tall, metal shelves of books that filled the room, stretching up into the gloom. They were vibrating. Thump. A heavy book slid off a high shelf and hit the linoleum floor with a dead, final sound. Thump! 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 More books followed. Then dozens. It was like a hailstorm of paper and cardboard, books raining down in the aisles around us. The librarian screamed, a real scream this time, a sound of pure panic. Everybody out! Evacuate the building. People who had been scattered in the archives started to run, their hurried footsteps echoing in the chaos. The shelves were shaking harder now, swaying like giant metal trees in a hurricane. I pulled Lena toward the stairs, my mind blank with animal terror. Run! Just run! We were halfway to the exit when it happened. In the middle of the noise, the falling books, the screams, the vibrating metal, I felt a sudden intense pocket of cold right next to my left ear. It was a cold that sucked all the sound away, just for a second, and a voice whispered directly into my ear. It was a low, guttural rasp, a sound of dry leaves and static, a voice that had been dead for a very long time. Why aren't you home? I spun around, my arm swinging out to hit whatever was there. My hand sliced through empty air. There was no one. Just the chaos of the room, the flickering blue screens lighting up the terrified faces of strangers pushing past me toward the stairs. Lena was pulling my arm. Nate, come on! My legs finally obeyed. We scrambled up the stairs, joining the small, panicked exodus from the basement. We didn't stop in the main lobby. We ran straight through the main doors, past bewildered security guards, and burst back out into the bright, indifferent afternoon. We stumbled to a halt on the wide stone plaza, breathing hard, hearts pounding. The sun was warm on my skin. The sounds of traffic were real. It felt like we had surfaced from a deep, dark ocean. We stood there for a long moment, just trying to breathe, trying to convince ourselves we were out, we were safe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to look, to throw the phone into the street and run. But I couldn't. My hand, shaking, pulled it out. Unknown number. Below the number was a notification. You have one new audio message. Who is it? Lena asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was how it communicated. This was its weapon. I had to know. I had to hear it. I tapped the play icon and raised the phone to my ear. There was a burst of static, a faint hum like the one in the library basement. Then a voice came through, a voice thick with panic and desperation. A voice I knew better than any other in the world. It was my voice. Lena, my recorded voice gasped, breathless and terrified. Stop looking. He doesn't want us to know the truth. The recording paused. I could hear a wet, ragged sound, like someone trying to catch their breath while crying. Then my voice came back, dropping to a frantic, urgent whisper that drilled its way into my brain. He's right behind you. I couldn't breathe. My own voice, twisted with a terror I was only just beginning to know, echoed in the shell of my ear. He's right behind you. I ripped the phone away from my head, my arm moving in a jerky, disconnected motion, and almost threw it into the street. My gaze snapped up, scanning the open plaza, the pedestrians, The stone columns of the library. Nothing. No one. Just people looking at us like we were crazy. Maybe we were. Lena grabbed my arm, her grip of ice. Nate, what was it? What did you hear? I just shook my head, my throat a knot of tight muscle. How do you tell someone you just heard your own voice from the future? Or the past? Or some other place where you were already dead? Get in the car, I said, the words rough and torn. Just get in the car. We scrambled back into the familiar confines of her Honda. The doors slammed shut, cutting off the noise of the city, but it didn't help. The real noise was inside my head, the recorded sound of my own frantic breathing. Lena didn't even ask where we were going. She just drove, pulling away from the curb with a squeal of tires, merging into the afternoon traffic. The car was our only sanctuary. A bubble of steel and glass moving through a world that no longer felt real. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the engine and the quiet whoosh of the air conditioning. I stared out the window, watching faces and buildings slide by in a meaningless smear. My heart beat a hard, fast rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat for the damned. We need to find someone, Lena said finally, her voice low and strained. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on the road ahead. The police won't believe us, Lena. We already tried that. Not the police, she said. Someone else. Someone who deals with this kind of thing. A medium. A priest. A psychic. I turned to look at her, a hot surge of anger cutting through the fear. A psychic? Are you kidding me? You want us to go to some charlatan with a crystal ball and a visa machine? That's your plan? Do you have a better one? She shot back, her voice cracking. Because my plan so far has been to run. We ran from your apartment. We just ran from the library. We can't keep running, Nate. It followed us. It got into the library's computers. It sent you whatever that was. It's not just in the apartment anymore. It's attached to you. The word hung in the air between us. Attached. Like a parasite. Or a tumor. The thought made my skin crawl. They're fakes, Lena. All of them. They prey on people who are scared and grieving. They'll take our money and tell us to light some sage. Then what do we do? She screamed, her knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. Tell me, Nate, what's the rational, logical plan now? Go back to your apartment and ask it to please stop trying to wear your skin? Wait for it to send me a recording of my own voice next? I didn't have an answer. She was right. The cold, hard fence of my skepticism was all I had, and it had been breached and trampled into the mud. We were way past reasonable explanations. I don't know, I whispered. It felt like a surrender. A white flag raised over a battlefield I didn't even know I was fighting on. Lena took a deep, shaky breath, trying to regain her composure. Okay. Let's just go back to my place. We'll figure it out there. She reached over and tapped the GPS screen on the dash. It's got us going somewhere weird. I glanced at the screen. The highlighted route wasn't leading to her neighborhood. It was showing a winding path toward the industrial west side of the city, a place of warehouses and empty lots. Stupid thing, she muttered, her fingers jabbing at the display. It's been glitching all week. Let me just re-enter the address. She typed in her address. The system processed for a moment. The map recentered, showed the correct route for a single second, and then snapped back to the strange, unwanted destination. What the hell? Lena tried again. Type the address. Hit enter. The same thing happened. It was like a magnet was pulling the route back to that one specific unknown spot. Just turn it off, I said, a new kind of unease creeping up my spine. You know how to get to your place. She pressed the power button on the infotainment system. The screen went dark. As she turned her attention back to the road, a soft static hissed from the car speakers. Did you leave the radio on? I asked. No, I turned the whole thing off. The static grew louder, punctuated by pops and crackles. It wasn't a station that was out of range. It was the sound of raw, empty noise. Lena reached over and slapped the power button again. Nothing happened. The static continued, filling the car. She frantically mashed the volume down button on the steering wheel. The noise didn't change. Kes pop H S S S S S S S S S S S S S S S S S. Then the headlights started to flicker. On, off, in a broken, spastic rhythm. Other drivers were honking at us. Nate, what's happening? Lena's voice was high with panic. Pull over, Lena! Just pull over now! She steered toward the right lane, but as she did, a loud, definitive sound echoed through the car. Clack! The sound of the central locking system. A solid, mechanical thud from all four doors at once. I instinctively grabbed the handle on my door and pulled. It was locked solid. I jabbed the unlock button on the armrest. Nothing. Lena was doing the same on her side, yanking at the handle, her breath coming in ragged gasps. It won't open. It's not working. The infotainment screen, which had been off, flickered back to life. It wasn't the menu or the radio display. It was the GPS map. A single blinking pin marked our current location. And above it, in the destination field, was one word. Home. My blood turned to ice water. It wasn't taking us to some random warehouse. It was taking us back to apartment 7B. No, I breathed. No, no, no. It was then I felt it. A change in the car's momentum. Lena was trying to slow down, but the car was fighting her. The engine, which had been humming steadily, changed its pitch. It let out a low, guttural growl, then revved hard. Nate, she shrieked. I'm not doing this. The car lurched forward, throwing us back against our seats. It swerved violently, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic. Horns blared around us like a chorus of fury. Lena was stomping on the brake pedal with all her might, her leg trembling with the effort. It was useless. The accelerator was pinned to the floor by some unseen force. The steering wheel spun in her hands. She cried out, pulling her hands back as if the wheel had burned her. It spun left on its own, a smooth, impossibly precise arc, taking an exit ramp at a speed that made the tires scream in protest. The world outside was a terrifying blur of concrete and motion. The window! I yelled over the roar of the engine. I hammered my fist against the passenger side glass. It felt as solid as a bank vault. Lena was doing the same, her screams lost in the mechanical shriek of the abused engine. We were trapped. A metal coffin on its way to the cemetery. The car was a wild animal now. It flew down side streets, ignoring stop signs, weaving through traffic with a supernatural grace that defied all logic. It knew the way. It was a horse galloping back to its own dark barn. I could see the familiar skyline now, the shape of my building growing larger and larger, a concrete tombstone waiting for us. Why aren't you home? The whisper from the library echoed in my skull. It was a question. Now it was a command. This thing, this entity, Lasker, whatever it wasn't just haunting my apartment. It was a force that could reach out, twist the logic of computers and engines, and drag us back into its lair. It owned the broken code of the world, and it was using it to reel us in like fish on a line. The building was right there, looming over us. With a final, terrifying surge of speed, the car shot into the entrance of the underground garage. It ignored the designated parking spots and raced toward the visitor section, right near the lobby entrance. I braced for impact, my arms over my head, waiting for the final crash. SCREEEEEEEEEEECH. The car slammed to a stop so abruptly that my seatbelt dug into my chest, knocking the wind out of me. The tires smoked. The engine died. Silence. The sudden absence of noise was more shocking than the chaos. The hissing static was gone. The roaring engine was dead. We were parked perfectly in a spot directly in front of the glass doors leading to the lobby elevator. My ears were ringing. My whole body was shaking. I looked over at Lena. She was pale, her face streaked with tears, staring straight ahead at nothing. She was in shock. Then came one last sound. Click! The soft, gentle sound of the doors unlocking. An invitation. We sat there for a long moment, frozen, our chests heaving. The ordeal was over. The trap was set. It had delivered us to the front door. We didn't get out of the car. We couldn't. My legs felt like they were filled with wet cement. My phone buzzed in my lap. The screen lit up. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a text message. It was a notification from my calendar app. An event I had not created. A new appointment had been added to my schedule for tonight. 11 p.m. Finalized transfer. We couldn't move. The click of the door locks echoed in the concrete box of the garage, a sound of release that felt like the opening of a cage. An invitation. We were free to go, free to walk right into the lion's mouth. My phone screen was still lit up in my lap. 11 p.m. Finalized transfer. The words burned into my retinas. A business appointment for my own damn soul. Nate, Lena whispered. Her voice was thin, brittle, like a dead leaf. Nate, we have to get out of here. I know. But my hands were fixed on my knees. My legs were stone. The car, which had been our high-speed prison cell, now felt like the only safe place left in the world. Outside, through the windshield, the glass doors to the lobby gleamed under the flat fluorescent lights. Home. It was waiting. I had to try something. Anything. I fumbled for my phone, my thumb shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I swiped away the calendar notification and hit the phone icon. No signal bars. Not one. An empty triangle stared back at me, of course. In an underground garage, it made perfect sense. It was a logical, reasonable explanation, and that made it 1,000 times worse. The thing that brought us here used our own world's rules against us. No service, I said, the words catching in my throat. I can't call. We have to go, Lena repeated, more insistent this time. She unbuckled her seatbelt. The sound was a loud crack in the silence. It spurred me into motion. I unbuckled mine. We had to move. Staying here was just waiting. We got out of the car. My legs felt unsteady, like I hadn't used them in years. The air in the garage was cool and smelled of damp concrete and exhaust fumes. Our footsteps were the only sounds, too loud, echoing off the walls. We didn't run. We walked, staying close together, a slow, grim march toward the lobby doors. It felt like we were walking the plank. We reached the glass doors. I pushed. They swung open into the lobby. It was empty, clean, sterile, and silent. A few fake plants sat in oversized pots. The mailboxes lined one wall. On the other side of the space, past a small seating area with 2 uncomfortable-looking leather chairs, was the elevator. The security desk, Lena breathed, pointing. A small desk was tucked into an alcove near the elevator. Behind it, a man in a wrinkled blue uniform was slumped in a chair. His head was tipped back, his mouth open, a soft snore cutting the silence. He was fast asleep. Useless. Completely and utterly useless. A part of me wanted to scream at him, to shake him awake, but what would we even say? Our car drove us here by itself, and there's a ghost in my apartment who wants to finalize my transfer? They'd call the men in the white coats. We sank into the 2 leather chairs. They were cold against my back. We were in a holding pattern. Too scared to go up, too scared to go back outside. The antechamber to hell. We'll just wait, I said, trying to sound sure of myself. We'll wait until morning. We won't go up there. Lena just nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. She stared at the brushed steel doors of the elevator, as if expecting them to burst open. And then they did. Ding! The sound was soft, polite. The arrow above the door lit up. The door slid open with a quiet whoosh, revealing the empty, brightly lit cabin. No one got out. No one had called it. It just arrived. An empty taxi waiting for a fare. We both stared, holding our breath. The doors stayed open for 5 seconds. 10. Then, with another gentle whoosh, they slid shut. The light in the arrow went out. Silence returned. I looked at Lena. Her eyes were wide. A glitch? She offered, but her voice held no conviction. Maybe, I lied. Ding! Again. The light, the sound, the doors sliding open. Empty. Waiting. A silent, patient invitation. It was a game. A sick, twisted game of peekaboo. It knew we were here. It knew we were watching. The doors hung open. An empty metal throat. Then they closed again. Lena was on her feet. I can't do this. I'm going outside. I'll stand on the street. I don't care. Lena, wait. Ding. The doors opened a 3rd time, but this time was different. We were looking at the doors, but my eyes flickered up to the digital display above them, the small screen that showed the floor number. It wasn't showing G for ground. The number 7 was lit up in solid red. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just opening the doors anymore. It was telling us where it was. It was in my apartment. Or it was my apartment. The number 7 vanished. A 4 appeared. Then a 12. A 9. The numbers started to flash. A frantic, random dance on the display. 2, 15, 6, 1, 10. It was like the building's brain was having a seizure, its logic circuits fried by whatever this thing was. The flashing got faster and faster, a red blur of meaningless digits. And then it stopped. It stopped on one number. Solid. Unblinking. 7. My apartment. As if on cue, the light inside the elevator cabin went out. Flick. Just like that. One moment it was a brightly lit box. The next a black, vertical tomb. Total darkness. We stood frozen, staring into that square of perfect black. I couldn't even see the back wall. It was just a hole, a void that had opened up in the lobby. And in the center of that void, a shape began to resolve. It was faint at first, a disturbance in the blackness. A man's shape. Tall, thin, standing perfectly still. I couldn't make out any features, just a silhouette against a slightly less black background. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, deep silence. "Nate," Lena whispered, grabbing my arm. "Who is that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the shape was starting to look familiar. The slope of the shoulders, the way it stood. The figure took a single step forward, out of the deepest darkness, and into the dim twilight at the very edge of the elevator's opening. The lobby's fluorescent lights caught the fabric of its clothes, a dark gray t-shirt, worn jeans, the clothes I was wearing right now. My breath hitched. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was a trick of the light. It had to be. A reflection. But there was nothing to reflect. It was a solid shape. A person. It took another step, clearing the threshold of the elevator and standing on the polished marble floor of the lobby. Clack. The sound of a single shoe hitting the floor echoed in the quiet space. It was real. It was here. It was out. The thing was tall, thin, and wearing my clothes, but where its face should have been, there was nothing. It wasn't shadowed. It wasn't obscured. It was a smooth, featureless blank. A void. An empty space carved into the shape of a head. It turned its blank face toward us. I didn't think. There was no thought. There was only a single primal command that shot through my entire nervous system from the base of my skull. "Run!" I screamed the word, yanking Lena's arm, pulling her with me. We spun around, our sneakers screeching on the floor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We scrambled for the glass doors, my hands slamming against the push bar. The doors flew open. Cool night air hit my face. We were out. We burst onto the sidewalk, into the world of streetlights and distant sirens. We didn't stop. We ran. We ran like our lives depended on it, because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me deeper than any fear I had ever known, that they did. We sprinted down the block, our lungs burning, our legs pumping on sheer terror. We didn't stop until we were 2 blocks away, gasping for air, hunched over with our hands on our knees at a street corner. I coughed, my throat raw. My heart felt like it was going to explode. After a full minute, I risked a look back. The building stood there, silent and massive against the night sky. Just a normal apartment building. The lights were on in a few of the windows. Everything looked normal. There was no sign of the faceless thing, no sign of anything wrong. Maybe we had imagined it. Maybe the stress, the fear, the car, maybe it had broken our minds. Lena followed my gaze, her breathing still ragged. "Did you see it?" she asked. "I saw it," I said. Then my eyes found it. My window. Apartment 7B. The lights were on. I hadn't left them on. And standing in the window was a figure. It wasn't the blank-faced thing from the lobby. This was a man. His features were clear, even from this distance, illuminated by the light from inside the room. He was just standing there, looking down at us. It was me. And he was smiling. It was the same smile from the mirror. a wide, stretched, impossibly joyful grin that didn't reach the eyes. It was a conqueror's smile, a predator's smile. Then he slowly raised a hand, and he waved. A friendly, casual little wave. "Hello down there. Welcome home." We drove. I don't know for how long. The city lights blurred into a monotonous stream of yellow and white. My hands were clamped on the wheel, knuckles white. Lena sat in the passenger seat, not speaking, just staring out the window. The image of me, not me, smiling from my own apartment window was burned onto the back of my eyelids. Every time I blinked, I saw it. That wide, happy, hungry grin. "There has to be someone," Lena finally said, her voice small. "Someone who deals with this kind of thing." I just shook my head. "Who, Lena? The Ghostbusters? We saw what we saw. It was in the lobby. It was in my apartment. It's me." "It's not you," she snapped, her fear turning to anger. "Stop saying that. There's a woman. A friend of my aunt's, she told me about her a while back. Lives out past the city limits. People go to her when doctors can't help." I let out a short, harsh laugh. "A psychic? A con artist? That's your plan? Do you have a better one?" She shot back. Silence. She had me there. "My plan involved driving until we ran out of gas and then, I don't know, curling up in a ditch to die." Her plan was insane. But it was still a plan. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like defeat. "Fine. Call your aunt." An hour later, we were on a dark, unlit road, the car's headlights cutting a tunnel through the trees. The GPS had given up a mile back. We were following Lena's shaky directions. "It's a gray house with a red door," she read from her phone. "She said we'd know it." And we did. It stood alone at the end of a dirt driveway, slumped and tired, the paint peeling. It was less a house and more a place that had given up on being a house. A single dim yellow light shone from one window. The red of the door was faded to a dull rust color. This felt like a mistake. A huge, desperate mistake. We got out. The air was cold and smelled of wet earth and pine needles. We walked up the creaking wooden steps. Before my hand could even touch the door, it swung open. An old woman stood there. She was tiny, swallowed by a thick wool cardigan. Her face was a web of wrinkles, her hair a thin white bun. Her eyes, though, were sharp and dark. They weren't welcoming. They weren't hostile. They were just ancient, like two black stones polished by a river. She looked at Lena, then her gaze shifted to me. She stared for a long, uncomfortable moment. Her nostrils flared slightly, as if sniffing the air. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask what we wanted. "It's not a ghost following you," she said, her voice a dry crackle, like old paper. "It's a ghost waiting for someone. You came to its door." She stepped aside and gestured us in. The inside of the house was one large, cluttered room. It smelled of dust, wood smoke, and something else, a sweet herbal scent. Books were piled everywhere. Strange, dried plants hung from the rafters. In the center of the room was a small, round table with 3 chairs. A single, thick, white candle sat in the middle of it. "Sit," she commanded, not asked. We sat. The chairs were hard. She shuffled over to a small hearth where a few embers glowed. She used a pair of tongs to pick up a bundle of dried leaves tied with string, lighting the end in the fire. A thick, fragrant smoke began to fill the room. It smelled like sage and something bitter, something I didn't recognize. She walked a slow circle around the table, waving the smoking bundle. The smoke clung to me, heavy and cloying. She didn't chant, she didn't mumble. She just walked, her dark eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my head. "The thing in your apartment," she said, her voice low. "You saw its face?" "It didn't have a face," I said, my throat tight. "In the lobby. Then I saw another one. In the window. It looked like me." The old woman stopped behind my chair. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "It wears a face like a coat," she whispered, her voice right next to my ear. "The face you saw waving from the window, the one that looks like you, he is also a victim." "The last one." My blood went cold. "What are you talking about? What last one?" "This thing is old," she continued, ignoring my question. She finished her circle and sat down across from us, placing the smoking leaves in a clay bowl on the table. The smoke curled up between us. "It doesn't haunt, it nests. It finds a place and it waits. It learns. And when someone lives there long enough, someone with the right kind of emptiness inside, it makes a copy. A better copy. A happier one." Her eyes bored into me. "That apartment wasn't yours to take. The last tenant, he never really left. The part of him that belonged there is still there. This thing just borrowed his shape to greet you. The happier copy, the conqueror's smile. It wasn't my double. It was the thing wearing the last guy like a suit. And it had made one of me too. The faceless thing in the elevator. A blank slate, waiting for a personality to be printed onto it. My personality." The old woman leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. She began to speak in a language I didn't understand. It wasn't a chant, it was a string of hard guttural sounds. A series of commands. Her eyes were locked on the candle flame. The flame danced. It grew taller, then shrank. It flickered wildly, casting our shadows into a frantic, jerky dance on the walls behind us. The room grew colder. I could see my breath. A deep, penetrating cold that sank right into my bones. Lena had her arms wrapped around herself, her teeth chattering. "Something's wrong," Lena whispered. The woman didn't stop. Her words came faster, harsher. The candle flame sputtered, fighting against an invisible wind. I watched it, mesmerized. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the droning of her voice. Then it happened. Flick. The candle flame vanished. Not blown out. It was just gone. We were plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint red glow of the embers in the hearth and the dying smoke in the clay bowl. Silence. The old woman had stopped talking. "Ma'am?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. A low, gurgling sound came from her throat, and then she spoke. But it wasn't her voice anymore. It was the voice from my phone's calendar. A flat, synthesized digital whisper that filled the entire room, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "No one can help you." The woman's body went rigid. Her head snapped back. A violent shudder ran through her, and she crashed sideways off her chair, hitting the wooden floor with a sickening thud. She began to convulse, her limbs thrashing in the near darkness, a horrible, choking sound coming from her throat. "Oh my God!" Lena screamed, scrambling back from the table. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away from the writhing shape on the floor. It found us. It followed us here. There was no escape. A low hum started, a deep vibration I felt in my teeth. It grew louder. A stack of books on a shelf across the room rattled, then lifted an inch into the air. They just hung there. A gust of wind slammed through the room, howling, sending loose papers flying like a flock of startled birds. The windows rattled in their frames. The front door slammed shut with a boom that shook the whole house. We were locked in. Then the pressure came. It was like the weight of the ocean pressing down on me. I was thrown back in my chair, pinned by a force I couldn't see. It crushed the air from my lungs. Lena screamed again, a thin, choked sound. She was pinned too, her eyes wide with terror, her hands clawing at a throat held by an invisible hand. Everything that wasn't bolted down began to rise. Chairs, books, brass pots, the clay bowl. They lifted slowly, silently, into the air, turning in lazy circles in the dark room. The wind shrieked. The house groaned around us. My eyes darted to the center of the table. The tendril of smoke rising from the herbs was no longer dissipating. It was pulling together, twisting, coiling, thickening. The gray smoke turned to black. It gathered in the space above the table, a churning, roiling mass of pure darkness. It had no arms, no legs. It was a shifting, shapeless void. And then, in the center of the void, 2 points of light ignited. Bright, burning red, like the embers from the hearth, like 2 malevolent eyes staring out of a hole in reality. They fixed on me. I felt their gaze like a physical touch, cold and sharp. It wasn't looking at my body. It was looking past my skin, past my bones, looking right into the hollow space inside me it wanted to claim. The pressure intensified. Black spots danced in my vision. My lungs burned. This was it. This is how I die. Pinned to a chair in a crazy old woman's house, crushed to death by an impossible thing made of smoke and hate. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Crash! Everything fell at once. The sound was deafening. Books, furniture, pottery, all of it hit the floor in a single violent instant. The wind died. The pressure vanished. I gasped, sucking in a huge, ragged breath of dusty air. The silence that followed was absolute. On the floor, the old woman stopped shaking. She lay still for a moment, then pushed herself onto her hands and knees, coughing, a deep hacking cough that shook her whole body. Lena was sobbing, curled into a ball on the floor. The old woman lifted her head. The embers in the hearth cast just enough light to illuminate her face. It was a mask of pure terror. Her eyes found me, wide and shaking. She crawled a few feet away from me, as if I were the source of the danger. She pointed a trembling finger. It doesn't want to possess you, she rasped, her voice broken. It doesn't want your body. She took another shuddering breath, her eyes locked on mine. It wants to swap places with you. The words hit me harder than the invisible force had. Swap places. You have to go, she choked out, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. So it can come out. You have to leave this world so it can step into it. Swap places. The words hung in the air, colder and heavier than the supernatural chill that had just slammed through the house. The old woman's terror wasn't for show. It was the raw, guttural fear of someone who had stared into the abyss and seen it stare back with a plan. What does that mean? Lena's voice was a ragged whisper from the floor, where she was still curled up. Swap places? The old woman scrambled backwards on her hands and knees, her wild eyes never leaving me. She was looking at me like I was a bomb about to go off. It doesn't want your meat and bone, she rasped, her voice torn to shreds. It wants your life, your name, your friends, your place at the table. To leave this world, she jabbed a trembling finger at the floor, at the very foundations of the house, so it can enter yours. The blood drained from my face. This was worse than possession. Worse than death. It was erasure. To be yanked out of existence, cast into what? The black, roiling smoke? That void with red eyes? While a copy, a thing wearing my face, went to my job, talked to my friends, slept in my bed. No, I said, the word barely audible. How do we stop it? You baited it, she spat, coughing again. You moved into its nest. Now you have to bait it again, lure it into a new prison. A prison? What kind of prison? I demanded, getting to my feet. The room was a disaster zone of fallen books and broken pottery. A vessel, she said, her breathing evening out slightly, a flicker of the wise woman returning through the mask of fear. It's drawn to echoes, to strong feelings trapped in objects, especially old electronics. They hold patterns, memories, ghost data. You need something of yours, something old, something you loved, something that has a piece of your soul in it already. We lure it in, offer it as a new home, and then she made a sharp, crushing gesture with her hand. Destroy it. My mind raced. Old electronics. What did I have? An old laptop? A broken phone? No, that wasn't right. It had to be something more. Something with history. And then it hit me. A memory so sharp it was almost a physical pain. My dad, the year before he died, handing me a small, gray brick. A Game Boy. His old one. The screen was scratched, the D-pad was soft from use, but it worked. The ding of the Nintendo logo appearing on the pea-green screen was the sound of my childhood. Tetris. He taught me how to play. We'd spend hours competing. It was in a box in the back of my closet, the single most precious thing I owned. I have something, I said, my throat tight. Back at the apartment. Lena looked up, her face streaked with tears and dust. We can't go back there. We can't. It's the only way, the old woman said, her voice firm now. She pushed herself up, bracing a hand against the table. She looked from me to Lena, her dark eyes piercing. It showed its power here because you were with me. It felt threatened. Back in its nest, it will be arrogant. It will be waiting. That is our only advantage. It thinks you will run. She shuffled to the hearth and picked up 2 small, flat, black stones, no bigger than my thumb. She pressed one into my palm and one into Lena's. They were unnaturally cold. Keep these in your pocket. They won't stop it. Nothing can stop it. But they may confuse it, muddle its attention for a few moments. It will be enough time to grab what you need. She looked at me. Get the object. Do not touch anything else. Do not speak. Get in, get it, and get out. Then bring it back here. The drive back was a silent scream. Every traffic light seemed to be staring at me. Every reflection in the shop windows looked like that grinning copy of The Last Tenant. Lena sat rigid in the passenger seat, clutching the stone in her pocket so tight her knuckles were white. I could feel the cold weight of mine against my thigh, a pathetic, useless piece of rock against a thing made of cosmic hate. We pulled up across the street from my building. It looked the same, just a brick building full of lights and lives. But I knew what was waiting behind one of those windows. It was nesting. I'll wait here, Lena said, her voice small. I'll keep the car running. No, I said, the word coming out harder than I intended. I'm not going in there alone. The woman said, it gets confused. 2 of us might be better than 1. You stand by the door, in the hall. Don't come in. If I'm not out in 2 minutes, you leave. You hear me? You get in the car and you drive and you don't look back. She stared at me, her eyes wide with fear, and nodded. We walked into the lobby. The air was still. The night doorman wasn't at his desk. I didn't know if that was a good sign or a bad one. We took the stairs. The sound of our footsteps echoed too loudly in the concrete stairwell. Each floor we passed felt like a deeper level of hell. We reached my floor. The hallway was empty. The lights hummed. I walked to my door, 2B. My hand shook as I pulled the keys from my pocket. I looked back at Lena. She stood 20 feet away, near the elevators, her arms wrapped around herself, looking like a scared animal. She gave me a tiny, terrified nod. I put the key in the lock. It turned with a smooth, soft click. I pushed the door open, my breath caught in my chest. The apartment was normal. No, not normal. It was perfect. A stack of mail on the little entry table was perfectly squared. The shoes I'd kicked off by the door were now sitting side by side, parallel. There wasn't a speck of dust on the coffee table. The picture frame on the wall that had always been slightly crooked was now perfectly level. The air didn't smell of anything. Not stale air, not the city, nothing. It was the absence of a smell. It cleaned up. The thought hit me like a physical blow. It tidied the place, like it was expecting a guest. My heart hammered against my ribs. I kept my hand on the doorknob, the other clutching the cold stone in my pocket. I scanned the living room. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. The closet was in the bedroom. I took a step inside, letting the door stay wide open. I moved without making a sound, my sneakers silent on the hardwood floor. Each step was a lifetime. I passed the living room TV. The screen was a black, polished mirror. I passed my laptop, closed on the desk. I reached the bedroom. I slid the closet door open. The familiar smell of cedar and old clothes washed over me. It was the first real thing I'd smelled since I stepped inside. There, on the top shelf, was the shoebox marked MISC. My hands were shaking badly now. I reached up, my fingers brushing against the worn cardboard. I pulled it down. I placed it on the bed and lifted the lid. There it was. Underneath some old photos and a tangle of charging cables. The gray brick. The Nintendo Game Boy. I reached in and my fingers wrapped around the cool, familiar plastic. Click. The sound was sharp, electric. It came from the living room. My head snapped up. I looked from the bedroom, through the doorway, into the main room. The TV screen was on. It wasn't showing a cable channel. It was glowing with a bright, harsh light. Before I could process it, another click. My laptop on the desk popped open on its own, its screen flaring to life. BZZT. My phone, lying face down on the kitchen counter, lit up, vibrating against the granite. One by one, every screen in my apartment turned on. They weren't showing static. They weren't showing an error message. They were all showing the same thing, a grainy black and white image, the high detached angle of the hallway security camera. And they were all showing Lena. She was standing there, right where I left her, pacing back and forth by the elevators. She was biting her lip, looking at her watch. She was waiting for me. I was watching her on a dozen screens, all at once. The trap wasn't for me. I was already in it. The trap was for her. I was frozen, clutching the Game Boy. My mind screamed, "Get out," but my legs wouldn't move. Then the image on the main TV, the big one, flickered. The angle changed. It was no longer the security camera. It was a clear, steady shot, as if from a camera right behind Lena's shoulder, looking down the hall towards my open apartment door. I could see the worry etched on her face. She took a hesitant step forward. And a voice came from the TV speakers. It was my voice. "Lena," it said, calm and reassuring. "Hey, it's okay, come on in. It's all clear." A wave of ice washed through me. I opened my mouth to scream, to warn her. "Lena, no, don't! It's a trap!" The words came out as a choked, raw squeak. The air in the room was thick, heavy, swallowing the sound before it could even form. It was like shouting into a vacuum. No echo, no noise. Just the useless scrape of my own throat. I was silenced. On the screen, Lena stopped. I saw the conflict in her eyes, relief warring with fear. She heard me. Or she heard it. "Really?" Her voice sounded tiny and distant through the TV's audio pickup. "You got it?" "Yeah, I got it," my voice replied from the speakers, smooth as silk. "Hurry up. Let's get out of here." She started walking towards the door. Towards me. Towards the open maw of the trap. I tried to scream again, a desperate animal sound of pure panic. Nothing. I was a prisoner in my own body, forced to watch. And then I saw it. On the television screen. From the deep shadows at the far end of the hallway, a figure emerged behind Lena. It was me. It was wearing my clothes, my jacket, my jeans. It had my hair, it had my face. It moved with my walk. But its eyes, even on the screen, I could see they were wrong. They were calm, the eyes of the predator that has its prey cornered. It wasn't frantic like me, it was patient. It raised a hand, slowly, to place on Lena's shoulder. She was just a few feet from the doorway now. Her face was turning from worry to a smile of relief. My eyes darted from the screen to the real doorway of my apartment. It was moving. The heavy wooden door, the one I had left wide open, began to swing shut. It moved slowly, silently, with an impossible smoothness. Click. The soft, final sound of the latch catching in the frame. The TV screen went black. I was alone. In the dark. Locked in. The click of the lock echoed in a silence that was suddenly absolute. The apartment wasn't just quiet. It was dead. All sound from the outside world, the city hum, the distant sirens, the life of the building, was gone. I was in a box, my lungs seized. I lunged for the door, my fingers scrabbling against the smooth, cold wood. The knob wouldn't turn. It was solid, frozen in place. I slammed my shoulder against it. Once. Twice. It was like hitting a wall of solid steel. It didn't budge. It didn't even rattle. "Lina!" My voice was a dry croak. I tried again, putting every ounce of air I had into it. "Lena! Get out of here! Run!" A sound came from the other side of the door, a choked, wet gasp. Then a scream! It wasn't loud. It was short, sharp, and cut off so fast it was more of a punctuation mark than a cry for help. Then nothing. Just the dead air pressing in on me. I sagged against the door, my forehead slick with sweat. I pounded on it, my fists making dull thuds that were swallowed by the room. "Lena? Lena, answer me!" Silence. The most complete silence I had ever known. She was gone. Or worse. And that thing, the copy of me, was with her, My eyes shot to my phone on the kitchen counter. I scrambled for it, my feet tangling in the rug. I snatched it up. The screen was black. I mashed the power button. Nothing. Dead. Of course it was dead. The outlet it was plugged into looked like a dark, empty mouth. Every screen in the apartment was dead. The trap was complete. I slid down the kitchen cabinet to the floor, my breath coming in ragged bursts. Think. I had to think. The old woman. What did she say? My hand went to my pocket, my fingers closing around the cold, smooth stone. A useless comfort. It will be enough time to grab what you need. My eyes fell to my other hand. I was still clutching the Game Boy. The gray plastic was warm now from my grip. A vessel. We lure it in, offer it as a new home, and then destroy it. It was the only plan I had. It was a crazy plan whispered by a terrified old woman, but it was better than sitting here waiting. My gaze fell on the clock on the oven. The small digital numbers glowed a sickly green. 10:47 p.m. The memory of her words hit me again, something I'd barely registered in my panic. Something about the power of thresholds, of moments between one thing and the next. She'd made a gesture at a clock on her wall. The veil is thinnest at the turn of the day. The transfer must be complete before midnight. Transfer. The word sent a jolt of ice through my gut. I had to move. Now. I scrambled to my feet. The coffee table. It had to be the center. I swept the magazines and a dirty mug onto the floor with a clatter. It was the first loud noise since the door had shut, and it made me jump. I kneeled on the rug, placing the Game Boy in the exact center of the table. It looked small. Pathetic. A child's toy against that. I pulled the black stone from my pocket. The old woman's instructions were a frantic blur in my head. Place the offering. Place my token before it. Speak the words. Do not stop, no matter what you see. No matter what you hear. I put the stone on the table, just in front of the Game Boy. I took a deep, shaky breath. I didn't know what the words meant. She had made me repeat them until they were burned into my memory. They felt like sandpaper in my mouth. Animas in vasculo, I whispered. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. Louder. Firmer. Animas in vasculo, corpus in exilium. The air in the room grew heavy, thick. Voces te. Ostendete. A flicker. My head snapped up. On the coffee table, the dark green screen of the Game Boy had lit up. No sound. Just a blocky, black rectangle slowly descending from the top of the screen. The Nintendo logo. But it was wrong. It was slow. Painfully slow. As if the machine were wading through mud. And then the sound started. The familiar startup ding was stretched, distorted into a low, groaning moan that seemed to come from the machine itself, from the walls, from inside my own skull. It was a sound of immense, ancient pain. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't stop. Animas in vasculo, corpus in exilium, voces te, ostendete. I kept chanting, the words getting faster, sloppier. My gaze was locked on the Game Boy. The Nintendo logo faded out. The screen didn't go to the Tetris title I knew so well. It stayed a sickly, glowing green. Then I felt it. A slow, rhythmic pulse in the floorboards. The room was breathing. I looked at the wall opposite me. The paint seemed to soften, to swell outwards an inch, then pull back in. A deep, silent inhale and exhale. No matter what you see. I forced my eyes back to the Game Boy. On the screen, pixelated letters were forming, crawling one by one into existence. FINALGAMEA, choked sound, escaped my throat. This wasn't a prison. This was an invitation. A sound to my left. A long, sharp scrape. I risked a glance. A deep scratch was carving itself into the drywall, a razor-thin line of white dust trickling down. It drew itself from the ceiling to the floor, a brutal scar on the skin of my apartment. Then another, right next to it. And another. Faster and faster the walls were being torn apart from the inside, silent and vicious. Corpus in exilium! Animus in vasculo! I was shouting now, my voice hoarse with terror. And the whispers started. They came from everywhere at once. From the vents, from the dark corners, from behind my own ears. They weren't speaking the garbled chant. They were speaking my name. Jack. A woman's voice. Gentle, like my mother's. Jack, you're scaring me. Lena's voice, full of fear. Such a good boy, Jack. A voice I hadn't heard in 20 years. My third-grade teacher. They were pulling my life apart, using my own memories as weapons. They swirled around me, laughing, mocking, pulling at the edges of my sanity. Vostestendete, I screamed, a final desperate roar. Show yourself. The room obeyed. The shadows in the corner of the living room by the single window that looked out onto the street began to move. They weren't just shadows from the lack of light. They were gathering, coiling, flowing together like smoke and oil into a single standing shape. It was tall and thin, all wrong angles and limbs that were too long. It had the rough shape of a man, but it was a mockery of one. It had no face, just a smooth, dark surface where features should be. It absorbed the light. It absorbed the sound. The whispers stopped. The walls stopped breathing. Everything stopped. There was only me, kneeling like a fool, and it, standing in the corner. It took a step, no sound. It just was here, and then it was there, a foot closer. It was looking at me. I could feel its gaze like a physical pressure, 1,000-pound weight on my chest. This was it, the final moment, the flashpoint. It raised a long, thin arm. My mind didn't even make a choice. It was pure animal instinct. My hand shot out, not for the Game Boy, but for the cold stone in front of it. The charm. The token. The last, useless piece of hope. I yelled the last 2 words of the chant, the part the old woman had said was the most important, the part that closed the trap. Accepet donum. Accept the gift. And I threw the stone. It didn't clatter against the plastic casing. The moment the stone touched the Game Boy, a light erupted from the device. It wasn't green. It was a violent, pure white light that bleached all color from the room. It wasn't a glow. It was a silent explosion. The shadowy thing reeled back, a silent shriek tearing through the room as a formless wave of pressure. It was being pulled. The light from the Game Boy was a vortex, a hungry mouth, and the shadow was its food. It fought, its long limbs clawing at the walls, leaving deep gouges in the plaster, but the pull was too strong. I felt it too. A hook sunk into my chest, right behind my ribs. I screamed, a real scream this time, as I was lifted from my knees and dragged through the air. The room spun. The white light was everything. The shadow was being shredded, pulled into the light like black thread into a loom. I was being pulled right behind it. Panic. Pain. A feeling of being torn, unmade, atom by atom. The last thing I saw was my apartment. The torn walls, the overturned furniture, the small coffee table with the impossibly bright light, all shrinking into a single point. Then, black. My cheek was pressed against the floor. The familiar texture of the hardwood, the smell of dust and old wood. I gasped, a ragged intake of air that hurt my lungs. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. The room was normal. The coffee table was where it should be, covered in my stupid magazines. The walls were intact, painted a boring beige. No scratches, no scars. The light from the street lamp outside cast long, soft shadows across the room. The door was closed. I scrambled up, my whole body shaking. I checked myself. My clothes were fine. My skin was my skin. I was whole. It was over. My eyes fell on the coffee table. There, in the middle of the mess of magazines, was the Game Boy. Its screen was dark. I reached out a trembling hand and picked it up. It was just a piece of plastic. Cold. Lifeless. I did it. I actually did it. The crazy plan worked. A wave of relief so powerful it made my knees weak washed over me. I laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. I won. I actually won. I stumbled to the window, my legs unsteady. I needed to see the world. To see something normal. I looked down at the street. Cars passed, their headlights cutting through the night. A couple walked a dog. Everything was as it should be. Lena's car was gone. Good. She got away. She was safe. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass, my heart still hammering against my ribs, but with relief now, not fear. Then I saw him. Across the street, standing under a glowing streetlight. It was me. He was wearing my jacket, my jeans. He had my hair, the same stupid way it sticks up in the back. He wasn't looking around. He was looking straight up, directly at me, at my window. I froze, the blood draining from my face. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. The man on the street, the me on the street, raised a hand, not in a wave, just a small, casual gesture of acknowledgement. Then he smiled. It wasn't a monstrous grin. It wasn't evil. It was my smile, the one I gave when I found my keys or remembered a good joke. It was a smile of simple, quiet satisfaction. He held my gaze for 1 second longer. Then he lowered his hand, turned, and casually walked away, melting into the shadows between the streetlights, becoming just another person in the night. I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty space where he had been. My mind raced, trying to put the pieces together, trying to deny what I was seeing. The old woman's words came back to me. Swap places. The ritual wasn't an exorcism, it was an exchange. Complete the transfer. The Game Boy wasn't the vessel, it was the key. The entity wasn't pulled into the machine. I was, for a moment, just long enough for the other one to take my place. And I was sent back here. To the cage. I looked at my hands. I looked at the familiar walls of my apartment. My prison. He was out there, living my life. And I was in here, the new ghost in the machine. The final words of the chant echoed in my head, their true meaning hitting me like a physical blow. Accepi donum. Accept the gift. I hadn't been casting a spell on it. It had been casting one on me. My mind was a blank, white scream. The smile. That damn satisfied smile on my own face, across the street. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real. And I was here. No way. The instinct came first, a blind panic that ignored the impossible. I spun from the window, my legs tangled, and I scrambled for the front door. My hands slapped against the wood. My fingers closed around the knob. It felt solid. Real. I twisted. Nothing. It didn't feel locked. There was no resistance, no jiggle of a deadbolt. It was fused, welded shut. It was one solid piece of metal and wood, as if it had never been a door at all. No, I whispered, the sound dead in the air. No, you don't. I slammed my shoulder into it. A jolt of pain shot up my arm, but the door didn't even shudder. It was like hitting a concrete wall. I hit it again, and again. My grunts were swallowed by the room, absorbed by the walls like they were made of insulation. No echo, no vibration, just the dull, wet thud of my own body hitting an unmovable object. This was the cage. He was out there, and this was the cage. That scream, Lena's scream on the other side of the door, it wasn't a scream of terror for her. It was the sound of the trap closing on me. A farewell. My lungs burned. I pounded on the door with both fists. A frantic, useless rhythm. Let me out! Hey, anyone! Silence. The same thick, dead silence as before. The realization hit me, not like a wave, but like a needle of ice plunged straight into my brain. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. Not really. I was on the other side of the glass. The ghost in the machine. The thing I thought I was fighting, I had just become. I wasn't a man pounding on a door. I was a memory pounding on the inside of a box. I stumbled back, my gaze darting around the room. My room. My couch. My stupid, half-dead plant in the corner. It was a perfect replica. A stage. I wasn't looking out for my home anymore. I was looking in from somewhere else. My eyes fell on the TV screen. It was black. The laptop on the coffee table was closed. My phone. I didn't know where my phone was, and I knew it didn't matter. They were dead. They had to be. Then the TV flickered. It wasn't a loud, sudden power on. It was a soft bloom of light, like a slow dawn. No sound, just an image. It was a view from behind a counter. I saw the back of a man's head, my head. My stupid hair that always sticks up. He was ordering coffee. I knew the place. The grind stop, 2 blocks down. The chipped formica counter, the perpetually grumpy barista, Dale, wiping down the espresso machine. I watched as I paid with my card, took the cup and turned. He smiled at Dale. A casual, easy smile. My smile. The screen went black. A second later, the laptop on the table popped open on its own. The screen lit up, showing my desktop. My messy arrangement of icons. A browser window was open to my work email. A new message popped up. From Linda Harris. Subject, you okay? The text appeared as if someone were typing it in real time, but there were no hands on the keyboard. Hey. You just took off? Saw your car was gone. That was weird tonight, Jack. You were acting so strange. Call me when you get this. Just want to know you're safe. My blood ran cold. He had my car. He had my phone. He was getting texts from Lena. He was going to call her back. With my voice. He was going to soothe her, tell her everything was fine. That he was just stressed. He was going to slip into my life like a foot into a worn-out shoe, and no one would ever know the difference. He wasn't just wearing my face. He was stealing my world. The laptop screen went dark. I was breathing in short, sharp gasps, my heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest. I had to be real. This was a nightmare. A side effect of the ritual. I just had to wake up. I ran. My feet pounded on the hardwood floor, the sound muffled and wrong. I burst into the bathroom, my hand slapping the wall for the light switch. The single bulb above the mirror flickered on, casting a harsh yellow light. I looked up, and I saw the wall, the cheap off-white tiles behind me, the edge of the shower curtain, the towel rack. But not me. My reflection wasn't there. I stood perfectly still, my breath caught in my throat. It was like I was made of glass, a hole in the world. I raised a hand, slowly, in front of my face. I could see it, my own hand, my own fingers, pale and trembling. But in the mirror there was nothing, just the empty space where a man should be. No, I choked out. No, this isn't. My mind refused to finish the sentence. I leaned forward, my face inches from the glass. I could feel my own breath, hot and moist, but the mirror's surface remained clear. No fog, no sign that I was there at all. A desperate, animal need took over. I needed to feel something solid, to prove the mirror was wrong, that I was still here. My hand shot out. I didn't aim to touch the glass. I aimed to smash it, to shatter the lie it was showing me, but my knuckles didn't hit glass. There was no impact, no sound of shattering. My hand just went through. I gasped, pulling it back as if burned. The sensation was the most profound horror I had ever felt. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm, it was nothing. A complete absence of feeling, like plunging my arm into a vacuum. The air itself had more substance. I did it again, slower this time. My fingers, my hand, my wrist slid through the plane of the mirror. I looked at my arm. It was there, solid as ever. I looked at the mirror. My arm was gone, swallowed by the silver surface. On the other side, inside the medicine cabinet, I could see my own ghostly translucent fingers hovering inches from my toothbrush, my bottle of aspirin. I wiggled them. The ghostly fingers wiggled. I tried to grab the toothbrush. My fingers closed around nothing. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't affect anything. I was an observer, a phantom. I yanked my arm back, a sob catching in my throat. I fell back against the opposite wall, sliding down to the cold tile floor. I'm a ghost. The words echoed in the silent space of my mind. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a diagnosis. The ritual wasn't a trap for it. It was a trade, a soul for a soul, a prisoner for a warden. He got my life, my body, my world. I got the cage. I sat there on the bathroom floor for a long time. Time didn't seem to mean anything here. The light from the bulb never wavered. There were no sounds from the street. Just me and the crushing weight of my new reality. Then I felt it. A change in the air. A drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The kind of cold that starts inside your bones. The hair on my arms stood up. I wasn't alone. I pushed myself to my feet, my eyes scanning the small bathroom, then peering out into the living room. It was empty. The same silent stage set as before, but the feeling was stronger now. The undeniable sensation of being watched. I stepped out of the bathroom, moving slowly, trying not to make a sound, a useless instinct from a life I no longer had. My eyes swept the room. The couch. The coffee table. The window. Nothing. And then I saw it. Near the armchair, the air began to shimmer, like a heat haze on a summer road. It was subtle at first, then it grew stronger, coalescing. It thickened, twisting like smoke, slowly taking on a shape. The shape of a man. A man who looked exactly like me. He was translucent, a flickering, staticky image of myself. But his clothes were different, rumpled. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide with a permanent, screaming terror that I knew intimately. It was the face I'd had just minutes ago. It was the other Jack, the one who lived here before me, the one whose place I had taken. He stared at me. His existence was a silent question. You? Cremant? I couldn't speak. I could only stare back at this horrifying mirror image of my own recent past. He was the warning the old woman had tried to give me. He was the reason for all of it. He took a step toward me. No sound. He just glided over the floor. He raised a trembling, see-through hand. He didn't point it at me like an accusation. He pointed past me. He pointed at the wall. His mouth opened, a perfect O of horror. It was a scream, but a scream with no sound. A silent, eternal shriek that I felt in my soul. He pointed at me, then at the wall, then back at me, over and over. A desperate, frantic message. He wasn't a threat. He was a warning. I turned, following the direction of his pointing finger. I looked at the plain, beige wall that separated the living room from the bedroom. What was he trying to show me? The paint began to change. It didn't peel or crack. It thinned. The color desaturated, fading like an old photograph left in the sun. It became gray, then translucent, then it vanished completely. I wasn't looking at drywall anymore. I was looking through it. I could see the guts of the building, wooden studs like a rib cage, silver-gray pipes for water, bundles of colored electrical wires, the building's veins and arteries. But that wasn't what he wanted me to see, because inside the walls, between the studs and woven through the pipes, there were others. Shapes. Figures. Standing inside the very structure of the building. A woman in a floral dress from what looked like the 1970s, her hands clasped at her waist, her eyes staring at nothing. A few feet away, a young man, early 20s, wearing a faded rock and roll t-shirt, his form partially intersecting a thick drainage pipe. Further down, an older man in a suit and hat, his silhouette dark and still. There were more, half a dozen of them, maybe more, that I could see in just this one section of wall. They weren't screaming, they weren't rattling chains, they were just standing, still, silent, like statues in a forgotten museum. Their eyes were all the same, empty, blank, worn down by an eternity of nothingness. They were part of the architecture now, trapped souls serving as the building's insulation. I looked back at the other Jack. He was still pointing, his silent scream continuing. But his form was beginning to fade. The edges of him were growing blurrier, more transparent. He was being pulled back, his own energy spent. He was rejoining the collection. My gaze drifted from the fading ghost back to the figures in the wall. I understood. This apartment wasn't a cage. It was a processing center, a place where the new acquisitions were held until they too grew quiet and faded and took their place in the walls with the others. The other Jack wasn't warning me about the prison. I was already in it. He was welcoming me to the collection. The whiskey burned. Good. It was the first coherent thought I'd had since the swap. Everything before had been a storm of sensation. The glorious, painful push of air into lungs that were finally mine. The solid thud of feet on pavement. The weight of muscle and bone, an anchor I hadn't known I was missing for an eternity spent as smoke and whispers. This body was a machine. A good one, healthy, young enough. I ran a hand. My hand, over the stubble on my chin. The scratch was real. The noise of the bar, a low thrum of bass and clinking glass, was a symphony. I took another sip of the amber liquid. It slid down my throat, a controlled fire. In the wall, there was only cold, a dry, silent cold that seeped into your non-self until you forgot you ever were. I wasn't in the wall anymore. I was here. I had won. The memories that came with the body, Jack's memories, were like a film reel I could play at will. They felt distant. His love for that woman, Lena, his stupid job, his anxieties, they were data points, nothing more. A user manual for the life I had just hijacked. He was screaming in the collection now. I could almost feel the faint, pathetic echo of his terror, a pleasant background hum beneath the music of my new world. He was where he belonged. I was where I belonged. Freedom. The word was a flavor, rich and dark like the whiskey. I was watching the way the light from the neon sign outside painted a red stripe across the polished wood of the bar when a shape slid into the stool next to me. I didn't look up. People came and went. That was the beauty of this place. Anonymity. Impressive performance. The voice was quiet, not a whisper, but a normal speaking tone that cut through the bar's noise with surgical precision. It was meant only for me. My head turned slowly. My new muscles obeyed with practiced ease. The man was nothing. He was aggressively average. Graying hair, cut short. A plain, dark blue jacket over a nondescript shirt. He looked like an accountant on his way home. He could have been anyone, which meant he was no one. And that set every alarm I had buzzing. "Do I know you?" I used Jack's voice. It felt natural, a low rumble in my new chest. The man smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of appraisal, like a jeweler examining a stone. "Not yet, but we know you. Or rather, we know what you are." He took a slow sip from a glass of water the bartender had left for him. The exchange at apartment 4B. The ritual. The acquisition. It was quite a show. The whiskey in my stomach turned to ice. My hand tightened on my glass. How? How could he possibly know? My existence for centuries was a secret, whispered between dust motes and cockroaches in the plumbing. The ritual was ancient, obscure, a desperate gamble I had whispered into Jack's sleeping mind for months. It wasn't a public spectacle. "I think you have me mistaken for someone else," I said. The line came from one of Jack's movies. It sounded weak, even to me. "No, I don't," the man said, his eyes never leaving mine. They were a flat, washed-out gray. The eyes of someone who looks at the world but doesn't live in it. We've been monitoring the collection for a long time. The entire building is a unique phenomenon. A spiritual battery of a sort. You're not the first to get out, you know. Just the most recent. My mind raced. This wasn't a random encounter. This was an interception. My grand victory, my escape from that silent hell, was just a blip on someone else's radar. I wasn't free. I had just walked out of one cage and onto a different stage, with an audience I never knew existed. I felt a flicker of the old cold, a ghost of the prison walls. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice low and hard. I scanned the room. The bouncer by the door, the emergency exit behind the bar. I cataloged the room's occupants, Jack's memories, providing tactical overlays. That guy was too drunk. That couple was arguing. Nobody was paying us any attention. It was just me and this ghost in a cheap jacket. "A recruiter," he said simply. He folded his hands on the bar. "Think of us as an agency. We find unique assets, individuals with abilities others don't possess. You, for example, have just demonstrated the ability to cross a metaphysical barrier, commandeer a physical vessel, and flawlessly integrate into a new identity. That's a very rare skill set." He paused, letting the words sink in. He wasn't threatening me. He was profiling me. It was worse. "And you're not the only one," he continued, his voice dropping slightly. "All of your brothers, the ones still trapped in the walls, the ones who haven't faded completely yet, they're all just waiting. yearning, stuck between worlds. He looked at me, and for the first time, there was something other than appraisal in his eyes. It was the faintest hint of pity, and it was the most insulting thing I had ever felt. We can help them. We can help all of you. Help them? The idea was absurd. They were the losers, the ones who failed. They were the residue left behind. Why would I care? But his offer, it was a new piece on the board, a piece I didn't understand. Why? I asked. The question was a single sharp stone thrown into a still pond. Because talent like yours is wasted in a wall, the recruiter said. He reached down beside his stool and lifted a black, hard-shell briefcase, placing it on the bar between us with a solid click. It looked like it had been through a war, scuffed corners, one latch slightly bent. But it's very useful to us. Of course nothing is free. My eyes were locked on the briefcase. The trap was finally showing its teeth. In exchange for our assistance, the man said, his fingers resting on the latches. You and the others we liberate will work for us. He flicked open the latches. The sound was loud in the sudden, focused silence that had fallen over our small section of the bar. He lifted the lid. The inside wasn't filled with money or weapons. It was lined with neat, orderly files. Dozens of them, each a slim manila folder with a black and white photograph clipped to the top. Men, women, all ages, all races. They were passport photos, driver's license pictures, security camera stills. Faces of the blissfully unaware. These are your next assignments, the recruiter said, his voice a flat, business-like drone. Our organization has certain needs. Sometimes we need someone to disappear. Sometimes we need information from a secure location. Sometimes we just need to deliver a message. He pulled out one of the folders. He didn't open it. He just tapped the photo on the front. A man with a thick mustache and a tired expression. Imagine this, he said. We need access to a corporation's data servers. Security is biometric, almost impossible to bypass. But the head of IT, this man right here, can walk right in. If one of your brothers were to occupy him, he could walk in, download what we need, wipe the servers, and walk out. The original owner's consciousness, what's left of it, would be a jumbled mess. He'd be diagnosed with a psychotic break, a stroke. He'd be discredited, institutionalized. But our asset, our new agent, would be free, housed in a new body, waiting for the next job. I stared at the photos. It wasn't a prison he was offering. It wasn't freedom either. It was a new form of haunting, a chain gang of souls, sent out to hollow out person after person on command, to become untraceable ghosts in the global machine. We need deniable agents, the recruiter stated, his gaze fixed on my face, searching for a reaction. Agents who can be in two places at once. Agents who leave no DNA, no fingerprints, no history. Agents who, when the vessel is used up, can simply discard it and return to a safe house to await a new shell. Your apartment building, that's the perfect safe house. A barracks for souls. The scale of it hit me. A corporation of ghosts. A clandestine army of the dispossessed. My great escape was just a recruitment drive. I was employee number 1. My gaze drifted over the sea of faces in the briefcase. Anonymous lives, ready to be hollowed out and worn like suits. My eyes scanned them, one after another, and then they stopped. My breath hitched. The new lungs forgot their function for a second. The photo was clear. It was taken from a distance, maybe a security camera. She was laughing, her head tilted back slightly. Long, dark hair. A familiar curve to her lips. It was a face I knew intimately, not from my own past, but from the reel of memories I had stolen. The memories of the man now screaming in the wall. Lena. The name on the folder tab was typed in neat, black letters. Linda Harris. The recruiter saw it. He saw the exact moment my new eyes locked onto her file. A predator's instinct for noticing the slightest falter in its prey. He reached into the briefcase with 2 delicate fingers and slid her file out, placing it on top of the others. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She has potential, he said, tapping her picture. Very resilient, strong-willed. She fought your predecessor's influence for weeks, even when she didn't know what it was. A prime vessel. Durable. He looked up from the photo, his dead gray eyes meeting mine. The thin, appraising smile was back. It would be a good start for one of your brothers, don't you think? A gift to welcome them to the program. He pushed the file an inch closer to me. So, do you want to help them? 6 months. 6 months since the final scream in this apartment went unheard. I guess the landlord aired the place out. Mom, I know it's a little high, but it's got great light. I wedged the phone between my ear and shoulder, grunting as I shoved another cardboard box marked Books Heavy AF across the floorboards. The wood was old, a dark honey color, scuffed with the ghosts of tenants past. No, I'm not asking you for money. I don't know, it feels right. A lie. It felt available. That was the main thing. After 3 weeks of roommate interviews that felt more like parole hearings, the promise of my own 4 walls was worth a few extra $100 a month. Solitude. The word itself felt like a luxury. Just be safe, Chloe, a single girl in the city. I know. Lock the deadbolt, don't talk to strangers, carry my pepper spray. I recited the mantra, my eyes scanning the empty room. It was a simple layout. A main living area that bled into a small galley kitchen, a single bedroom off to the side, and a bathroom. The previous tenant had left a full-length mirror propped against the far wall, a tall, imposing rectangle of silver. A nice bonus. Saved me a trip to IKEA. I'm serious. Call me when you're all unpacked, okay? I love you. Love you too, Mom. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto a box labeled kitchen crap. The silence that rushed in was immediate and total. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, waiting kind of quiet. I shook my head. First day jitters. I was just used to the noise of my old shared house. The distant TV, the roommates coughing, the upstairs neighbors' awful taste in music. This was just empty. Time to make it less empty. I started with the kitchen, wanting the comfort of a functioning coffee maker more than anything else. Pulling open a cabinet beneath the sink to look for cleaning supplies, my fingers brushed against something hard and plastic tucked way in the back corner, behind the U-bend of the pipe. I frowned, pulling it out. It was a Game Boy, the old gray brick from the 90s. It was ridiculously clean for something left under a sink. No grime, no water damage. It felt preserved. Nostalgia hit me like a ton of bricks. My cousin had one of these. We'd spent an entire summer trying to beat Tetris. On a whim, I rummaged through the kitchen crap box until I found the plastic clamshell of AA batteries I'd bought for my TV remote. They fit. I slid the power switch up. The little red light flickered on, the screen glowed a sickly green, and that iconic tinny ding echoed in the quiet apartment. A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time all day. It worked. Unbelievable. But no game cartridge was visible in the slot. The screen should have been blank, or showed the Nintendo logo and nothing else. Instead, pixelated letters started to form, one by one, appearing slowly on the green screen. Like a text message from a ghost. ANYETHEPLEASEME. I stared at the screen. My smile faded. What the hell? It had to be a game, some weird, hacked indie game left in the system's memory. A meta-horror thing? Pretty clever. I'd seen stuff like this online. Little Easter eggs for dedicated players. A shiver traced its way down my spine, cool and unwelcome. My brain told me it was a clever prank. My gut told me to throw the thing out the window. The brain, ever the party pooper, won out. I was being stupid. It was just code, I chuckled, a high, nervous sound in the silent room. Very funny, I said to the empty air. Out of a sense of weird obligation, I tapped the plastic screen with my fingernail. Hello? Who is this? The letters on the screen vanished instantly. My heart did a weird little stutter step. Okay, that was responsive, too responsive. For a tense second, the screen was blank. Then, new words began to form, faster this time. DONTTRUSTTHEMIRROR. The blood in my veins turned to slush. This wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't a game. The words burned on the little green screen. A single, impossible command. My breath caught in my throat. My head snapped up, my gaze drawn inexorably across the room to the tall, silent sheet of glass propped against the wall. The mirror. I saw myself, a girl with wide, terrified eyes, pale face, a stupid gray video game console clutched in her hand like a religious icon. My reflection was perfect, a perfect copy. My fear was its fear. My posture was its posture. Click. The sound was sharp, final. It came from the front door, the deadbolt. I hadn't touched it, I had watched it. The little metal knob had turned all by itself. I scrambled for my phone on the box. My fingers fumbled, sweat making the screen hard to unlock. I stabbed at the screen. No service. A single, empty X where the bars should have been. 5 minutes ago, I was talking to my mom. Now, nothing. What the hell is going on? My mind was a frantic storm of useless questions. Is this a prank? Did the old tenant rig the apartment? Is someone messing with me? The grinning skull of logic tried to rationalize it. A smart lock controlled by an app. A signal jammer. But there was no smart lock, just old solid metal. And no logic could explain the words on the Game Boy. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I could hear the blood roaring in my ears. The apartment felt smaller. The walls seemed closer. I was in a box, a locked box. I was a single girl in the city. Mom's words echoed in my head, no longer a gentle worry, but a clanging alarm bell. I couldn't help it. My eyes went back to the mirror. I had to look. I had to prove the little plastic toy wrong. My reflection stood there. Still me. Same messy ponytail. Same stupid college sweatshirt. I took a hesitant step forward. The reflection took a hesitant step forward. I stopped. It stopped. I let out a shaky breath. It let out a shaky breath. See? Nothing. Just me. Just my own stupid, scared face. Then it smiled. It wasn't my smile. My mouth didn't move. My face was frozen in a mask of fear. But the face in the mirror, its lips peeled back from its teeth. Slowly, deliberately, it started small. A twitch at the corner of the mouth. Then it spread. It stretched impossibly wide, pulling the skin of the cheeks taut. A grotesque gash of white teeth in a face that was supposed to be mine. The eyes in the reflection didn't smile. They were flat, cold, watching me. A sound tore from my throat, a choked, wet gasp. I staggered backward, tripping over a box, and fell hard onto the floor. My hands scrabbled against the wood, trying to push me away. But my eyes were locked on it, the thing wearing my face. It stood there, in the mirror, holding that awful, silent grin. It was perfectly still, a predator that knew its prey was trapped. And then I saw him. Behind my smiling reflection, deep within the silvered glass, something else was moving. A shape, faint at first, like smoke. It solidified. It was a man. His face was a contortion of pure, undiluted agony. He looked familiar in a way that made my skin crawl, though I had never seen him before. He was wearing clothes I recognized from the closet, a faded band t-shirt, worn jeans, the previous tenant's clothes. He was pressed up against the glass from the inside. His hands were flat against the surface, palms forward, as if trying to push his way through. His mouth was open in a silent scream. There was no sound. No thump of his fists, no cry of his voice. Just pure, desperate motion. He was banging on the inside of my mirror, his eyes screaming at me. Run! Get out! He was trapped in there, with it. The thing that looked like me, the thing standing in front of him, slowly raised one of my hands. It held up a single index finger, and it wagged it back and forth. A slow, gentle, chiding motion. No, no, no. Time stopped. The air crystallized. I was on the floor of my new apartment, the deadbolt thrown, my phone useless, staring at a mirror that held a grinning copy of me, a taunting jailer and its silent, screaming prisoner. The loop was starting over. And this time, it was my face it was wearing.